Hey gang, what's up? Just Ehren right here. Question period Canada. How y'all doing? It's a stormy one in Nova Scotia. It's pouring here. My backyard looks like a waterfall. It's ridiculous. What we're going to be doing today is checking out the Arrivecan app investigation. It's in committee. This is such a scandal, guys. Like millions and millions of dollars have been wasted. And it seems like the government knew. Like, it's hard getting answers, like, in this forum, but they're asking the questions at least. Let's jump right in. Let's get this going.
Maintenant la séance. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. Bienvenue à la réunion.
Welcome to meeting number 107 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Public Accounts.
Pursuant to the standing orders, members are appearing both
Hey
in
everybody,
person,
what's up?
in the room, and remotely using the Zoom application. Reminder that all comments should be addressed to the chair. Conformément à l'article 108.3.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1083, the committee resumes its study of Report 1 Arrivecan, referred to the committee on February 12, 2024.
I'd now like to welcome our witnesses from the Office of the Auditor General, Andrew Hayes, the Deputy Auditor General, Sami Hanoush, Principal. Good to see you both again. Seeing you more than my spouse recently, it seems. From the Department of Public Works, which is a good thing on behalf of taxpayers. From the Department of Public Works and Government Services, Arian Reza, Deputy Minister, pardon me. It's been a long week already. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming in today. Catherine Poulet, Assistant Deputy Minister, Departmental Oversight Branch, Dominique Laporte, Assistant Deputy Minister, Procurement Branch, and our two lead principals will each have the floor for 5 minutes, as is custom. I'll turn to the Office of the Auditor General first. Mr. Hayes, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Monsieur le Président, merci de nous inviter.
Mr. Chairperson, thank you for inviting us back to discuss our audit report on the Arrivecan application that was tabled on February 12th. I'd like to acknowledge that this hearing is taking place on the unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. I'm accompanied today by Sami Hanoush, who was responsible for the audit. The audit examined whether the Canada Border Services Agency, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and Public Services and Procurement Canada had managed all aspects of the Arrivecan application with due regard to the value that would be derived, i.e. value for money. I'll limit remarks today to the role played by Public Services and Procurement Canada. The department was to issue and administer contracts on behalf of the CBSA and the Public Health Agency of Canada, where the value of a contract exceeded their delegated procurement authority. We found that Public Services and Procurement Canada had questioned the CBSA's decision to use non-competitive processes to award Arrivecan work. It did suggest alternatives such as shorter non-competitive processes or competitive processes with shorter bidding periods. Despite this advice, the agency decided to proceed on a non-competitive basis.
We also reported that the Canada Border Services Agency's overall management of the contracts was very poor. Essential information was missing from awarded contracts and other documents, such as clear deliverables and the qualifications required of workers. We found that contrary to Public Services and Procurement Canada's supply manual,
Hi Patty, how are you?
the department co-signed several task authorizations drafted by the Canada Border Services Agency that did not detail task descriptions and deliverables. Without this information, it is difficult to assess whether work was delivered as required and completed on time while providing value for money. Public Services and Procurement Canada also co-signed many of the agency's amendments to task authorizations. Some amendments increased the estimated level of effort or extended the time period without adding new tasks or deliverables. This drove up the contract's value.
Well, today it's pouring here in Nova Scotia. It's pouring.
To deliver value
Buckets of water
for dollars spent and support accountability for the use of public funds, the Canada Border Services Agency and Public Services and Procurement Canada should ensure that tasks and deliverables are clearly defined in contracts and related task authorizations. Mr. Chair, this concludes my opening statement. We would be pleased to answer any questions the committee
Hey,
may
Spiky
have.
Mikey,
Thank you.
what's up? Hey, what's up, Leroy?
Liza, you have the floor for up to 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. As the Deputy Minister of Public
Hey, Brent,
Services
what's up,
and
buddy?
Procurement Canada, my team and I are here to continue the important
Hey, Guy,
discussion
what's up?
about the
Guy?
Auditor General's
Guy?
report
Guy?
into the
not sure.
development of the Arrivecan application. I'm joined today by Dominique Laporte, Assistant Deputy Minister for Procurement, and Catherine Poulin, Assistant Deputy Minister for Departmental Oversight. During the pandemic, my department played a key role in keeping the work of the Government of Canada going, as well as providing key support to provinces and territories. We are particularly proud of our role with regards to the urgent procurement of critical supplies and life-saving vaccines. PSPC has been part of 2 large audits since the pandemic, one related to the procurement of personal protective equipment and the other to the procurement of vaccines. These audits found in general that the controls and the procurement process worked as they should.
Hello,
However,
Steve,
in
my
the case
man.
of Arrivecan,
Is that
both
Steve
the Auditor
McLeod, my
General
friend?
and the procurement
The guy that I know?
ombudsperson have identified areas
Kind of grew up with Steve,
where
like,
we
not
need
in
to
childhood,
strengthen
but like in
our
our
oversight,
20s.
notably related to documentation and to our procurement processes of IT consultants. We accept these recommendations in full and have already put management actions in place to strengthen our processes.
On improving and further strengthening our processes, especially when it comes to IT procurement, and we've been working since the fall to do just that. Actions we've taken to date include improving evaluation requirements to ensure resources are properly qualified, requiring increased transparency from suppliers around their price and their use of subcontractors. Third, improving documentation when awarding contracts and issuing task authorizations. Fourth, clarifying work requirements and activities and specifying which activities and which projects are worked on by contractors. In addition, my department is updating its guidance to aid other departments and agencies in procuring responsibly when using our procurement instruments under their own authorities. And finally, PSPC has also taken measures to appoint a senior executive who will be responsible for quality assurance and strengthening documentation within PSPC. Fundamentally, improving IT procurement requires us to ensure those processes are clear and transparent, and that the roles, responsibilities, and rules are understood and respected and adhered to. This includes working closely with the Treasury Board Secretariat and client departments and agencies to ensure that procurements are undertaken in a manner that respects the principles of fairness, openness, and transparency. In this regard, both the Treasury Board Directive on the Management of Procurement and PSPC's
Hey,
supply
Charlene,
manual
what's up?
stipulate the division of roles and responsibilities. For example, departments, our clients, are responsible for providing a justification for using non-competitive procurements. In the case of procurements related to Arrivecan, the Auditor General's evaluation found that PSPC effectively provided a challenge function to the CBSA and proposed various alternatives to using non-competitive processes, such as running shorter
Thank you,
competitive
Patty.
processes.
We have fun here.
Or shorter contract periods in the case of the non-competitive approaches. Within the context of the emergency situation brought on by the pandemic, PSPC and our legal counsel found that the justification provided by the CBSA for their approach was sufficient and met the criteria for emergency use. When it comes to a lack of transparency around decision-making, we are committed to addressing the root causes, strengthening document management practices, and continuing the deployment of our electronic procurement solution, so that transparency in decision-making is ensured and Canadians, parliamentarians, can have renewed confidence in the administration of federal procurement activities. New measures that we've put in place have already addressed a number of these areas, and we continue to take action to further strengthen the procurement of IT services. En terminant, je sais que les médias...
In closing, I know that there have been many concerns raised in the media and in parliamentary committees regarding federal procurement and the
Hi,
integrity
Cooney,
of the
what's
system.
up? How are you?
We do share those concerns and are actively working to improve the procurement system, as well as undertaking required investigations where warranted. The area of procurement is one that inherently has higher levels of risks associated with in terms of conflicts of interest. And that is why the government requires of all its suppliers, their subcontractors, and all employees to operate lawfully and in a responsible manner by, at a minimum, meeting the expectations and obligations set out in the Code of Conduct for Procurement. For federal public servants, those expectations and obligations
Valerie,
are
what's
outlined in
up?
the Code of Values and Ethics. These codes provide important underpinnings and guiding principles for the work that is done in procurement, and ensuring respect and adherence to these codes is of the utmost importance. Our actions will help reinforce the adherence to the codes, improve the way that we do business with companies, and further safeguard the integrity of the procurement system. Thank you.
Et voilà, merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Bradford, I saw you had your hand up. It's not up now. Did you have a point of order? Okay, just wanted to double check that I didn't miss you. Turning now to our opening rounds. Thank you very much for your opening remarks. MP Kusi, you have the floor for 6 minutes.
Kusi is so much fun, guys. Who doesn't like Kusi? Let's get some likes for Kusi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Here we go.
For being here today. Again, thank you very much to the team of the Auditor General for your fantastic
For Koos,
report.
come on.
Madame Reza, I'm glad to see you're in better health this week. Thank you very much for being here. This has not been a good week so far for the Liberal government. In the meeting that I attended yesterday, we had the Treasury Board Secretariat, including the Comptroller of Canada, agree with the Auditor General and her report that Canadians did not receive value for money for their report. I was also very proud of my team that pushed on the issue of the government employee that received $8 million for Arrivecan, while at the same time working in the public service, something that should have never have happened, as well as the motion that was passed yesterday by my team in support, with the support of the committee, to ensure that we are aware of all of the public servants who might potentially be in conflicts of interest with their role in serving the Canadian people. We have a wonderful public service, but of course we must always ensure that there is no conflict of interest. So if this has not been a good week for the Liberal government,
Kusi's wild in
Arrive
Parliament,
scam,
guys. You
and
ever see her on the
evidenced
floor?
by
She's
the media
nuts.
reports today of, unfortunately, the government members being triggered by the use of the word Arrive scam. But today I'm going to focus my questions on the national security exemptions, because we have determined already that there was not a value for money for Canadians. So now I'd like to turn to another important aspect, which is the national security exemption. So in April 2020, your department invoked the national security exemptions to grant GC Strategies, a company that I should add should be entirely banned from contracting with the Government of Canada, a $13.9 million uncompetitive contract on behalf of the CBSA. Why did your department feel that GC Strategies was the only company that was able to complete the work
Adam, what's up? How are
necessary
you?
on Arrivecan for such a significant amount of money?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. I
Me
think
too.
that first we need to look at the national.
I wouldn't want to be
security
on the wrong
implication.
side of Kusi at all.
This is a tool that
Hi,
exists
Donna.
in
What's
the
up?
trade agreements to give Canada the ability, in case of crisis, to be able to move quickly outside of the current competition. So each trade agreement allows this. So there is not a one-to-one relationship between the NSC and GC Strategies. Rather, the Public Health Agency, CBSA, various departments came forward and said because of the global pandemic, they had a need to move quickly, and they would ask us at PSPC for that authority. And in the consultation with legal counsel and PSPC, invocations were, or national security exemptions were granted, and that does not mean or guarantee a sole source strategy or any procurement process. I'm just going to pause here because I have an expert in NSCs with me in case Dominique?
Nothing to add. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that response. Just a reminder again, and I repeated this yesterday, I'll say it again today, that the Auditor General did stress In her remarks, my goodness, close to a month ago now, this is how long her report has resonated with the Canadians, the truth of it, that the pandemic, the crisis situation was not an excuse for the lack of the value for money. I'll follow up on my question, Ms. Reza. In the letter, the CBSA CFO wrote to you for the national security exemption, he stated that this contract would be necessary for 3 months to improve low-touch IT. Why would any company need $13.9 million for 3 months of work?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. I believe that when the CFO wrote to PSPC seeking the invocation and national security exemption, it actually described a whole series of different low-touch technology to keep all of the various border lines open. I don't remember seeing any relation to any one contract or any 13.9 million. I know that in the response that PSPC provided, we actually limited in our response saying that their NIC would be valid for a 3-month period because, again, with the evolving pandemic, we did not want to give a long-term NSC that would create expectations or further contracting requirements.
Further to this, the contract in question required a document safeguarding capability security requirement that was not met by GC Strategies. This requirement was removed 14 months after the contract had been initiated. Why were security requirements put in place for a sole source contract that the contractor couldn't even meet?
Thank you very much for the question. I'm going to ask Madame Boulet to answer.
Merci beaucoup pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chairperson. It's important to make a distinction between a security clearance of an organisation or a staff member and capacity that is requested by an organisation. It's not necessary for an organisation to have that capacity at the moment of the awarding of the contract. When that capacity is required, when a contract is put in place, the organisation must have that capacity. So it's normal that a contract be awarded without that capacity being pre-verified by contract security, and otherwise there needs to be an amendment to the contract to withdraw that requirement because it's not necessary for GC Strategies to carry out their contract. Thank you very much.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Merci.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you to the witnesses. Ms. Yip.
Minutes, please.
It is tough to watch Calamar. How do you say that?
Thank you. Ms.
Calamaru.
Reza, we appreciate you being
Calamaru.
ready to come to the first scheduled meeting when the meeting was canceled. So thank you
These
for
liberals
rescheduling
guys,
to come
they're
again.
no good.
When you
Hey,
are
Flips,
the
what's
signing
up?
authority for a contract with the client department, can you explain the division of responsibilities between what the client department does and what you do?
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. These divisions of responsibility between the client department and the contracting authority are actually well documented in the Treasury Board policy on contract management. But I'm going to actually turn to Dominique, who will give us a good overview of it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madame Deputy, and thank you. So in terms of the division and role responsibility, it's important to keep in mind that the client will define their requirement, their operational requirement. They define their budget. So basically, they're going to contact the procurement authority with a good or services that they want to procure in mind. And it's up for PSPC to provide an advice in terms of what is the process that is best suited for the procurement of, depending on the nature of the services. Is it a supply arrangement that is in place? Is it a standing offer? So to make sure that the client, and if this is beyond their client delegation, so that they can leverage our tool, so it
Hey,
allows
Laurent,
for a
what's up?
process that is usually competitive, is streamlined, and we can also benefit from supply arrangement that do exist. So in terms of our role, we are the contracting authority, so we're going to make sure, for example, that things are within budget. We take care of the financial evaluation of the bids received. In terms of the technical evaluation, this is up to the client. So there's clearly role and responsibility that are spread between the client department and with the contracting authority, and oftentimes it's played by PSPC.
Okay. So just to be clear, does the PSPC have the authority to go through and verify the
Hey, True
information
Blue,
being
what's up, buddy?
provided
How
by
are
client
you?
departments?
If I may, Mr. Chair, we certainly do, and this is something that also that has been truly reinforced since November 28 with our client department, and December 4th we sent directive to all our staff, making sure that we have also now a task authorization checklist that is very mandatory in terms of requesting information and not necessarily checklists that's been provided by the client, but actually seeing
I don't get the
copies of
sense
actual
that
CVs,
any of these
actual
people think
attestation
they're
of the
in trouble.
resources that they give permission to use their names, that their, for example, experience is an accurate representation. So all these things are now being double checked when by PSPC when we're using our authority.
Ms. Reza, as the Auditor General noted, PSPC did raise the issue and push back in the case of at least one contract that went to GC Strategies. Can you tell us more about that?
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. In fact, I have, our team has shared actually a package of information around that. But to describe that in more detail, you will see that there is an exchange of emails in terms of asking, as we just noted, the sole source justification is the responsibility of the department. So they created a sole source justification. The contracting authority pushed back and several times looking to ensure that the information was accurate, that it was really clear that we had to be convinced that there was only one IT firm that could provide staff augmentation in this. Looking at the timelines
Hi, Helen.
that
What's
were
up? How are
provided.
you?
So there's a whole series of steps where there was a challenge function at the DG level within CBSA to outline specifically what was required to be able to move forward.
What's going on with
Sorry,
this?
I did not hear your last sentence.
What?
I don't know if the mic didn't pick up.
Apologies. I just ended by saying that there was a whole series of steps that were outlined in the email to CBSA asking for further information to be able to document the file and to satisfy PSPC's challenge function on the sole source justification, the length of the contract, why they were not looking at different options. In emergency situations like we saw in the pandemic, while we weren't able to run full competitions, we kept defaulting to quick competitions of 5, 10, 15 days to try to ensure that we were using competitive tools.
And how did those quick competitions go?
Thank you very much for the question. The quick competitions worked very well across a broad range of commodities and PPE and various logistic pieces that we put in place.
What authority does PSPC have to reject a contract request from client departments?
Thank you very much for the question. I'm going to turn to Dominique for a technical answer.
So I think in terms of our authority, I think we have to be careful when we allow department to use our procurement instrument, whether
Hi,
it's
Helen,
a standing
what's up?
offer, supply arrangement. Our role is to play a challenge function, making sure that people do abide by the role of being open
so
and fair and transparent
smug.
procurement. This is an interesting question that you're
Do you
raising.
feel like you're
And to
getting
what
a straight answer
extent
from this
can
guy
we
right
say
now?
basically
'Cause I
no
don't.
to the client? Here, I think in the context of the pandemic, you have to remember the context of CBSA's employees. It was very difficult to have them at the border station. So all these elements would basically kind of make it a bit more challenging to play a challenge function back then. But I have to say that in the context of regular challenge function, eventually we're going to say no, and we've been saying no to clients in the past that they're not going to be able to leverage some of our procurement vehicle if they don't, for example, abide to the terms of condition of them. So.
Et voilà, thank you. That is the time for that segment. Maintenant, c'est Mr. Lemire. Bonjour. Vous avez 6 minutes.
You have 6 minutes, Mr. Lemire. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, and thank you to the witnesses for their reports in this important study. In the Auditor General's study, paragraph 151, we noted that Procurement Canada, as the central authority for contracting and procurement,
What world do they live in, True
called
Blue?
into
My
question the
question
decision
is
of
like,
CBSA
where do they
officials
live?
to propose
'Cause
and use sole source
they live in my
contracting
world.
for Arrivecan
I'm just
and propose
confused,
other
like, how they
alternative
can be
solutions
like
such as a
this,
competitive
so
process that would be
deceptive and
shorter, 10
dishonest
days, for example, or
with
contracting periods that would be
society.
shorter as part of a non-competitive process. Now, in your opening remarks, you confirmed this state of affairs. So we know that Public Services and Procurement Canada challenged some of the CBSA's decisions with respect to Arrivecan, but we don't have access to those emails. In a previous correspondence, apparently emails can be recovered for a period of 30 days, and yet the Treasury Board Secretariat yesterday intimated that it would be a period of 6 months for the recovery of emails. Can you confirm either or, please?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you very much for your question. We'll have to go back and see what the policy is when it comes to retaining documentation. Yesterday, we shared emails with the clerk of the committee that were requested by committee members. Moreover, we still haven't received the emails that we asked at committee, and yet the Auditor General already had those in her possession. Why is it taking so long to get those emails to us? And we'd remind you the role of elected officials to shed light on these issues. Parliamentarians play a central role when it comes to transparency of information, and this is crucial to us fulfilling our mandate. Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chairperson. We're doing our utmost. Normally it takes between a fortnight and 3 weeks to submit documents. We get them translated and then we send them through as soon as possible. We do our very best. I don't know if Dominique can tack on to that. Yes, indeed. Those documents are being translated. Some were tabled with the committee yesterday. We're acting very diligently, and we always do so when we receive such a request. Of course, translation takes time, but if those emails aren't tabled today, it'll be in the upcoming days. We only appeared here a couple of weeks back, and it takes time to get our hands on the emails and get the appropriate approvals, but they're on their way if they're not already with you. Question. Well, I'm glad to know that you're taking this seriously. It's absolutely crucial that we have access to these emails so that we understand what the contracting authorities did so that we can avoid a recurrence of this kind of situation. We know that this has been highly this has really been covered at length by the media. Have you had a crisis cell put in place? Where does the buck stop, and who should we be pointing the finger at when it comes to Arrivecan?
Je vais commencer en français, mais peut-être je vais.
I'll start in French. And then perhaps I'll We've reflected on that issue at length during the pandemic. In the procurement department, we awarded about 16,000 contracts for a total value of $20 billion.
Period for $20 billion worth of procurement on PPE, on vaccine procurements, on logistics, with a workforce of approximately 1,000 employees and executives working in this field.
Hey, Unga Bunga,
We did
what's
our
up?
best to make sure that we had records, governance was taking place, that we were supporting a vast array of not only clients, but in this period of time that we're talking about, the provinces and territories turned toward us for assistance with their acquisitions for hospitals, spooling up logistic trains. So there was a lot of different pieces going on with the same workforce trying to meet a breadth of needs that were very specific. So in terms
Hello, Bob.
of
What's up,
how
man?
we
How are
normally
you?
do things, there are many different hands working on many different contracts. It is not a one-to-one relationship. We support all of our clients, and we try to provide that level of due diligence and framework that we put in place to ensure that the rules are followed for transparency and openness, and that there's best value in the procurement process. Je vais m'arrêter ici. Je ne sais pas si Dominique.
I'll stop there and I'll hand the floor to Dominique. Well, I don't know if you're referring specifically to Arrivecan, but our department didn't have any contracts with respect to Arrivecan, and it's important to clarify that. We
Hey, Coins,
provided
what's up? Hi,
IT
Dimebag.
services to the CBSA But when it comes to crisis management, there was no Arrivecan file in our department. So we provided, as I said, IT services to the CBSA. Well, one can't conclude that this contracting process was carried out properly, given the complexity of the ecosystem of the management of the borders. But did the government give you the tools you required to succeed? Did you have the leeway to succeed in this project from an IT standpoint? Thank you for the question. I think that that would be a better question for the CBSA itself. There you have it. Your time is up.
MP Lidout, you have the floor for up to 6 minutes, please. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. First, I am shocked at what was discovered
Lori,
at
you'd
the
loud, right?
Arrivecan report. I can't believe nearly 60 million in contracts were awarded to companies and CEOs who did so little work to earn it. I am shocked at the lack of accountability measures. I am shocked that this company claimed to be an indigenous business. The $60 million that went to profits could have made a world of difference in my riding. It could have gone towards a harvester support grant and funding for community food programs that help to alleviate food insecurity, a condition imposed by decades of the lack of investments by successive liberal and conservative governments. This liberal government is looking to sunset this important program that supports hunters to provide for families and communities. Groceries and supplies are too costly and most families cannot afford them. How, I ask, is it always acceptable with this government to find nearly 60 million to justify a handful, just to a handful of CEOs and well-connected insiders? My first question will be to the Deputy Minister. I myself cannot go to my constituents to even try to justify to them that Arrivecan app was worth it. I am asking you to speak to the families in my riding that cannot afford basic groceries because the programs designed to lower their costs are not working. I'm asking you, through the chair, to explain to them why this government let some CEOs walk away with millions.
Somebody told me once, a friend told me that
Chair,
Lori
thank you for the
Idlow
question.
fakes her accent, that she doesn't actually have that.
Has been
she doesn't speak like that
uncovered
in
in
her
the last
regular
week
day-to-day.
on Dalian.
I don't know if that's true or not.
Their use of contracting,
But I'm always
their
thinking it.
employment is egregious. It's wrong, and it is a terrible situation. I myself have picked up the phone to speak to the RCMP commissioner. They've been suspended. So action is being taken. So I empathize that the situation is not acceptable. It has come to our attention, and we have moved as swiftly as possible to do something about it.
Mr. Chair, in yesterday's testimony, this committee was told that the Liberals and Conservatives together awarded a total value of contracts to GCS Strategies, to Dilian, Corridix, and Corridel Systems of around $107 million. Are you of the opinion that Canadians got full value for their money out of those contracts?
Thank you for the question. Those contracts span many years and many different departments who have had work done by those firms. Those firms have provided a variety of services, mostly in the professional services IT staff augmentation, which is in-house, is support to in-house priorities and deliverables. And they have indicated that they have received value, and where there is questionable value, as we've seen by the AG's report, actions are being taken to examine further measures.
I will now turn about the decision-making process around the suspensions of GCS strategies, Dillian and Cordex that was announced yesterday. Through the chair, can you tell this committee when the decision was made to review the security credentials of these companies and what the motivations for that review were?
Hey, Odious, what's up? How are
I'm
you?
going to turn to Madame Poulet.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chair. So I will go one by one. If we're talking about Dalian, a decision has been made to revoke the security clearance of the organization. This is mainly based on the fact that Dalian has two key senior officials representing the company vis-à-vis the contract security program. When we are informed that there are allegations against or the company or a key senior officials, we need to verify and support the evidence to see if it's against the control or what is required from the individual or the company to be in good standing with the contract security program. As we were informed,
Hey, Vern, what's
that
up?
a key senior official was also a full-time employee in one of the departments, this is against the exigence or the control of the program. So we were able to support that allegation very fast, and we were
Same
in a
here,
position
True
to
Blue. If I
suspend the
knew,
security
if I only knew.
of the key senior official as well as the security clearance of the organization. If I'm going to GC strategy, it's the same process that we are using in order to assess the compliance of the organization vis-à-vis the contract security program. We received allegations. However, allegations are not enough to support a decision to suspend. We need to support this by evidence. And as soon as we got enough evidence to support the decision, we decided to suspend the security clearance of the key senior official as well as the company. Thank you.
Thank you, and that is the time that finishes our first round. Beginning now, second round with Mr. Barrett. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
All right.
Has
Mike Barrett's one of our
PSPC
favorites here on the
been
channel. He
outright
just is. He's
banned
really sharp.
From, excuse
Really
me, has
keen.
PSPC outright banned GC strategies from receiving any and all government contracts?
So we have two tools that we use. Thank you very much for the question. One is a procurement stop work order for 180 days. So that's in place across the system. And we have a second tool, which is a heavy hammer in terms of security. So if you don't hold a security, you can't do business. So both tools are in place. So right now we're working across the system to terminate contracts and no new work.
So is that a pause or is that a prohibition? Let's just use plain language so that people understand.
No,
You got a good one there,
I'm
True Blue.
just putting it in place in my head. The suspension, and I'll learn here, is a prohibition until further notice. If there's more information that's forthcoming, if the
That's a pause.
RCMP invocation, well, I mean, it can't be into, for all intents and purposes, it can't be into perpetuity without some type of recourse. So we consider them suspensions, and there would have to be a very high response to get it back. It seems very doubtful at this stage, but I'm going to turn it again to Dominique.
I'm just happy to add very quickly on that. So they're currently suspended for 180 days. At the same time, we are seriously looking at termination. So basically, we want to make sure that those decisions are not made lightly. So we want to make sure that I do receive evidence eventually from my colleagues, that we're going to be taking that into account. And if the grounds are sufficient for termination, if it's basically it validates the grounds that we had for the suspension, we'll proceed with the termination.
Let me run something by you, very specifically in the case of GC Strategies. We had the principal for GC Strategies, Mr. Firth, at a parliamentary committee. The testimony, I'm certain that you're privy to, and you've seen it, where he admitted to falsifying information that he used to win a bid. He lied, and he admitted that at committee. And so whether or not the RCMP can use that in a criminal investigation, separate question, but can PSPC use it? He admitted to fraudulent activity in order to win bids for the government from the government of Canada. Is that not enough? And he also has been caught multiple times objectively lying to a parliamentary committee. But is fraud and forgery not sufficient grounds to ban, to blacklist, to have a prohibition in perpetuity for a contractor when we're talking about tax dollars?
If I may, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. What is said and also in front of committee, we have to be careful with that. So it does not necessarily, can we transpose that and use that? Again, I would say we start with the suspension. The desired effect is accomplished. Basically, the company can no longer secure any government contracts, can no longer do business. And we take the time because we want to make it right. If we're going to be terminating, we want to make sure that the supplier is not able to come back and allege grounds that for whatever reason, this person was not properly terminated. So.
Mr. Laporte?
They're not being paid, to my knowledge, they're not being paid by PSPC for any contract that is being done.
Do they have any contracts with the Government of Canada, any ongoing contracts with Social Sciences and Humanity Research Council of Canada, for example?
There was a call-out that was done by TBS, and it did not indicate that there was any outstanding contract with them or payment that were being made.
So you're confirming today that GC Strategies has no ongoing business with the Government of Canada?
This is my understanding, and I would be pleased to validate that with the committee.
So you'll validate that, you'll report back to the committee, but we'll take your answer at face value.
Thank you, just Mr. Barrett. So the committee looks forward for that validation. I appreciate your answer today. It was a request, and you acknowledge you could validate that. We look forward to that. Thank you. Mr. Barrett, you have
Hey, James,
5
what's up?
seconds.
How are you, man?
How many instances
Welcome to the
or
channel. We
contracts
watch Canadian
did-
federal
did
politics
GC Strategies
right here.
use false information in order to win the bids?
Thank you very much for the question. We actually, I think, at a request of OGO, looked at 2 areas of all active contracts with the 3 suppliers in terms of their security and their CVs. And in fact, Catherine's shop led the investigation.
Merci beaucoup. Tel que l'a mentionné la
Thank you very much. As the Deputy Minister mentioned, we conducted due diligence as soon as this matter was brought to our attention, and we worked with departments and agencies that are active contracts with them to assess 2 things in particular. Did those individuals have the proper security clearance to work on these contracts? And were they who they claimed to be? We also worked with companies, suppliers to provide CVs, and those CVs were shared with departments and agencies.
Thanks, James.
In order to
we
ensure
try to have
that
fun here.
they were
It's a
properly
great
categorized
crowd that we have.
and that they
Like,
had
the
the
community is
requisite
amazing.
levels.
Ma'am, I
it's fun.
appreciate
Hey,
the
Nature,
the
what's up?
process. I'm looking for a number of occurrences.
lors de ce processus.
During that verification process that started in the recent months,
Next is Ms. Bradford. You have the floor for
Chair,
5 minutes,
point of
please.
order.
Just 1 second, Ms. Bradford. Yes.
The response from the witness was not captured in interpretation.
Oh.
So if we could have it, the completeness of her answer was not captured. So if she could restate and we could have it
Sure.
Translated, I'd
Very
look
good.
forward to that response.
That is. Would you mind just repeating that en français ou en anglais, c'est votre choix. Puis we'll just make sure that the translation is working.
Aucun problème.
no problems whatsoever, Mr. Chairperson. So I conclude my response by saying that the verification of security clearances and CVs of the resources provided by the suppliers demonstrated no exceptions that would warrant intervening in the contracting process. The interpreter would point out that the microphone was switched off.
Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr.
Hey,
Chair,
Terry,
and
what's
thank
up?
you
How
to
you
the
doing?
witnesses for appearing today. So I want to look at the area of delegated authorities. So for the Deputy Minister, can you describe for the committee, please, more about delegated authorities and how those work and what goes to a minister and what doesn't?
Teflon or
Thank
non,
you very
what's
much
up?
for the question. There's a couple of different lenses to this. There is the delegated authority from the Financial Administration Act, and often when you have to run a department, the minister has to be able to delegate authorities to the deputy minister and to the executives and employees below. So different levels
Thank you,
of the
Teflon and
organization
on.
receive the training
We try
be
to have
able
fun here.
exercise their delegated responsibility when it comes
Like,
to
and it's not a
financial
good time
controls.
in Canada.
Can
Like, I
you
get
sign
that.
for a
But
budget?
we still
Can
try to
you,
have fun with the
provide
Canadian
assurances that
politics.
you
Like,
receive the goods and
we know we
services
need
that we
change,
receive?
right?
On the contracting front,
Big
it's a
time.
very similar kind of delegation instrument of contracting authorities. It is something that is refreshed frequently, and usually the delegation of authority in terms of what
Hi,
the
Tanya,
minister or the
what's up?
deputy or the assistant deputy minister signs off on authority to enter into contracts is dependent on risk, material level, various elements. In non-COVID times, the minister has delegated, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement has delegated their authority to the position of assistant deputy minister, and in some cases below. And during the pandemic, there was a updated set of delegated authorities that were put in place with.
What's up, Windsor Mike? How are you?
The support of Treasury Board, because we just couldn't keep up with the existing levels. So we provided various elements and staff training around the new delegation instruments.
What sort of volume of contracts are we talking about on an annual basis?
Thank you very
It's
much
my
for the
soap
question. I
opera
think this is a
nature.
really
Like,
important
I
question
love this
as
stuff.
we look at, the procurement function of the government of Canada.
More
going
interesting
forward,
than
what we
fiction.
need to deliver to support government priorities as well as how we actually structure our procurements. So what's important here is when you think about procurement, there's approximately 450,000 transactions that are procurement related done on an annual basis across the government of Canada. At PSPC, we do approximately 16,000 of these transactions, which roughly translate into contracts. It's not a perfect one-to-one because there's amendments and other elements. And so while we do a very small percentage of PSPC as a contract authority of the government's procurement function, the rest is done under department's own authorities and their own contracting authorities and financial authorities. But those that we do actually represents about $20 billion a year procurement.
A lot of it is fiction,
on a
eh,
basis on a
Kalamaru?
spend, on an annual
is,
spend of the government of Canada, which I believe is around $34 billion.
So what could the impact be if the delegated authority wasn't in place and everything had to go through the minister?
It would not be doable if you just look at the volumes, the risk, the complexity. The training a procurement officer has to be able to challenge function, to be able to ensure that a file is properly documented. It would just be impossible. In many instances, files of a certain volume, complexity, risk go to Treasury Board, and even that is a challenge to be able to try to keep up with the volume. And it would. I'll just pause here, Dominique.
I fully agree with the deputy. I would say that ultimately Canadians wouldn't get the service that they deserve from the Canadian government. It would stall the entire machine.
Okay, so PSPC has suspended the task or authorization authority for all 87 departments and agency it contracts for when it comes to IT professional services, not just for CBSA, not just for the companies involved in Arrivecan, but everybody. PSPC is negotiating new agreements with these departments and agencies to ensure more rigor in contracting. Can you tell us about what will be different in these new agreements versus how things were done previously?
Thank you very much for the question. And before I turn to Dominique, I do want to say that I think this is really important that the ground set that the reason we're doing this across the professional services, IT staff augmentation, and in general how we manage task authorizations is that the comments that came from the report were around the actual tool and making sure that we're using it to ensure that there is best value, clear deliverables, so that we're able, when we do get audited or when we want to go back and look at the decision making, there's a clear evidentiary trail. So we decided that we need to really look at it across the whole commodity to make sure that we were providing best value in the procurement process. Dominique?
Yeah, no, very good point have been raised. So in addition, what we want to make sure that we stay away from broad general task description and ensuring that the required skill set is not too wide. So this is also to response to the Auditor General recommendation 1.73 that was formulated to PSPC. Improving the evaluation requirement, basically making sure that when we look at CVs, it's not only basically at the contract award stage, but also at the TA stage, and also making sure that, and I did allude to that we get from the client actual evidence of the CVs of the resources
Hey, Terry,
that are being
what's up?
proposed, those resources
Second
attest
time in
of
the
the
room?
accuracy of their experience, and that also they provide their authorization to use the CV by a bidder or supplier. So all those steps in addition are being taken. Greater transparency, I would say. We want also to know who are going to be the subcontractor that are going to be used. So what are in terms of daily rate they're going to be providing. So there's new requirement that are all incorporated into what we call the task authorization checklist that has now become mandatory to use our tool, our supply arrangement. So if client did not comply with this new tool, they're not going to be able to use that. So that will bring a lot of additional discipline in terms of that, making sure that tasks are clearly defined. It's linked also to a specific outcome. Security requirements are being met, so there are also requirements for security requirement. So tons of new requirements, and when we're dealing with contract amendment, we want to make sure that there's a true reason for that contract amendment. Is the scope increasing? So what are the reason? And what's the obligation to proceed? So our officers are going to be performing much more challenge in future that they've been in the past. And not only basically being satisfied that they asked the client, but looking at the actual evidence that is provided. And most importantly, and this was also outlined by the Auditor General, that everything is documented. So we're going to be putting a lot of emphasis on proper documentation. So that would help. And we're also leveraging our new EPS, so electronic procurement system.
Thank you. I appreciate it. That went over, but I wanted to make sure we had a fulsome answer from you and your department. Turning now to, encore une fois, Mr. Lemire.
Mr. Lemire, you have 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. Let's talk about Dalian. The CEO and founder of the firm was both a private consultant and a public servant, according to La Presse. The value of the contracts obtained by Dalian since 2018 are billions of dollars, $3 billion from national defence, based on the public accounts data. The department didn't clarify whether Mr. Yao had been suspended with or without pay during an internal investigation. According to La Presse, they double-dipped as both a public servant and a contract worker. In a contracting process involving companies like Dalian, I understand that there are no checks that are made. This is a company that has contracts with the government since 2018 to the tune of over $50 billion, and the CEO is a public servant. How do you explain that?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question. Well, right off the bat, it's important to understand that there are multiple codes, ethics codes. We have a responsibility as a supplier has a responsibility under Code of Ethics codes.
Their responsibility. They have, as a public servant, you have, as a condition of employment, a requirement to declare your conflicts of interest. So on that side, I believe that this committee has asked colleagues from the Department of Defense to come and speak to the actions that they're taking. But I think it's very important in terms of a general response to understand that the system is we have a framework to prevent and detect and respond to conflicts of interest.
Hey, Richard, what's up? How are you?
Many different measures and triggers have been put in place by this. When we know about it, we act on it. The onus is on both the public servant and the contractor to be able to disclose any potential conflicts. This is a very unusual situation. I believe that we've been asked to come back and provide more detail on other
good luck, Mike,
similar cases that we know about. And I just want to close by saying that
bad ankle, man, hard to get around with those two ankles.
I'd just like to add one thing. In the course of the last year, we have laid off 5 employees who failed to declare a conflict of interest, and we fired 5 of them. And each and every time we lay someone off for public service wrongdoing, it's on the open data site of the Government of Canada that it's published. So you do this verification after the fact, not
good,
when you
Richard.
hire the individual. Response: when we hire
I've got a bad back. That sucks. But
before you
it'll
sign
go
your
in a
letter
couple
of
of days.
offer, you have to fill out a form that states your conflicts of interest, and at that point, a decision is made.
Next up again, Ms. Lidout, you have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I am Ms. Idlout, just so that I can help you.
Yes, thank you. Idlout, yes. I stumbled there again, but Idlout. Thank you very much.
Okay, as I said in my earlier opening statement, I said that I was shocked that the Arrivecan app was awarded to a business that claimed to be Indigenous. So I want to ask about the procurement process. But first, I would like to ask the Deputy Minister if it's a priority of this government to ensure that Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs receive contracts. If so, can the Deputy Minister explain why?
Thank you very much for the question. This is indeed a very key deliverable of the Government of Canada as it relates to procurement, as it relates to truth and reconciliation, as it relates to some of the work that's been done at Parliament and various committees and some of the reports that have come out. Putting a floor of putting a 5% set aside or 5% of the Government of Canada spend on procurement going to Indigenous firms is a goal that the government is actively pursuing. As part of that, the Indigenous Services Canada, the Department of Indigenous Services of Canada, has a directory of Indigenous suppliers that have qualified so that when the government is looking to fulfill various goods and services and looking to procure solicitation documents, that directory is consulted. And we make targeted efforts in various communities across Canada and various First Nations to try to use economic levers to encourage various Indigenous SMEs to come and compete to federal procurement opportunities.
Did anyone in the department or did the Deputy Minister check to see if the recipient of this contract was a part of that registry?
Thank you very much for the question. Officials that
Hi,
were
Bonnie, how are you?
looking at the contracting did confirm with the Indigenous Services Indigenous Services Canada that they were a member in good standing on the Indigenous Business Directory. That being said, we did ask them to carry out further audits as more and more information came to light, and that audit is underway with colleagues in Indigenous Services Canada.
Did anyone contact Alderville First Nations to verify that Mr. Eo is a member of that community?
Thank you very much for the question. I believe this is underway with Indigenous Services Canada.
Thank you. That is your time. Next up, we have Mr. Genuis. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
This is always fun.
Thank you, Chair. Just picking up on the issue of Indigenous procurement. Dalian's identity as an Indigenous company as part of the set-aside for Indigenous procurement is obviously absurd and a manipulation of the intention of the policy. The intention of the policy, presumably, is to give opportunities to Indigenous Canadians to be able to work in jobs that flow from government procurement. But this was a company that simply received contracts and subcontracted them, taking a cut along the way. There were no opportunities created for Indigenous people as a result of this. You mentioned a registry or a list of Indigenous companies that are used when considering this 5% set aside. What percentage of those companies actually create jobs for Indigenous peoples in Canada?
Thank you very much for the question. I actually don't have that information. I will refer the question to Indigenous Services Canada. There's about 2,600 companies on that list in various commodity areas.
Okay, I think we need to get further information at this committee or elsewhere about to what extent those companies should really qualify in terms of the actual objective of the policy, creating opportunities for Indigenous Canadians. Ms. Reza, I want to ask you about staff augmentation.
Hey, Ehren,
you
what's
spoke
up?
at the Government Operation Committee about this. You said, quote, traditionally staff augmentation works in a similar manner where you bring in a temp agency and they're asked taking on the burden of finding the resources. There are many shops that do this across the system, so there are about 635 IT firms that provide staff augmentation resources. So Canadians have become familiar with three companies, Corodex, Dalian, and GC Strategies, that receive work and subcontract, often without providing any actual value themselves. But this is an incredible number. We're not just talking about three companies, 635 companies. So why is this practice of multi-level subcontracting so common that there are 635 different companies that are doing it?
Thank you very much for the question. First off, there's 635 companies that provide task-based IT professional services. So in terms of why there's so many, I mean, the Government of Canada has various priorities that need to be filled by niche skill sets.
All good,
on
man.
IT professionals.
We're here
In terms of
every
your
day.
question about,
Sorry, but just to
the
clarify,
subs-
these are folks doing staff augmentation, which you defined before the Government Operations Committee, not as doing the actual IT work, but as doing the work of finding people who can do the work. So why can't the Government of Canada just kind of maintain a database of external resources who have this expertise, instead of going to 635 different companies to act as middlemen? Why can't they just keep a registry of those who are capable of doing the work to perform specific tasks? Right.
Thank you very much for the question. I think I received a similar question recently, and I think that the traditional model, if you permit, is like having a general contractor when you need to find somebody with a specific, an electrician or a certified plumber. So now what is being proposed is that we don't use that skill set that has been very helpful for us in the past to find the resources when we need to bring them in, regardless of whether it's IT or other staff augmentation, and to have a data set where we can type in and say, well, we need 5 IT engineers or 5 computer science graduates. And we're taking that on. We're looking at various elements, and I believe that we actually have a module that is a potential for us to be able to do that. But again, it's going to require a lot of administration now that.
Well, just to clarify the question, though, I mean, I think the idea of having someone who has a general contracting function who oversees the process of finding those external resources necessary. I mean, someone needs to be in charge of the project, but I just don't understand why that general contracting function can't be a public servant. Why there can't be someone inside of government who has that skill set of knowing where these different resources are and being able to consult the appropriate database. And I do want to ask you specifically, how many of these 635 middlemen companies have 2 employees or less?
Thank you very much. I believe that is an outstanding question that we're working on. The list is publicly available, all the companies that are on it, but we're trying to work to provide the breakdown. Some of them are very large companies that are well known. Some of them are very small, as we've indicated.
Okay, so just to clarify, you are in the process of providing to this committee the details of how many employees each of those 635 companies have, and when can we expect that information?
I'm not sure if it's for this committee or OGO, and I know that we're looking at it. I'm just looking over here. Do we have further information?
I don't think we have further information to share right now. Just be careful.
Okay, just to clarify, we would like that information at this committee as well, and if you can provide that, please. Do you agree to do that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, you finish your response, though?
No,
please?
that's fine. I just wanted to say also we have to be careful not to paint all suppliers with the same brush. Of these 3 companies, some of them are.
But they're all doing that staff augmentation work of subcontract.
But they're doing the same thing. You can paint them with the same
You'd like to
brush.
finish your answer briefly because time is elapsed. Go ahead.
Say that we have 3 companies that have been under the radar. We have to be careful because we have legit suppliers that provide truly value added to the Government of Canada. So I would be careful before we have the evidence that basically it's systemic, that we don't paint all these suppliers with the same brush. I think we just have to be mindful.
Thank you very much. Suivant, it's Ms. Shanahan. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I too thank the witnesses for being here because we've had occasion to expect that we would be questioning these witnesses, and that didn't happen in the past. It was abruptly canceled. So good to see the witnesses here. And just continuing on that line, it's a reminder, I think, to all colleagues that in this committee, we're not here to micromanage. Interesting to hear that my Conservative colleague supports us hiring more qualified
I agree
public
with that,
servants,
Lamonte.
and I hope that
I think that's
would
true.
continue to be the case, and that they would not be under the fear of being abruptly fired at any future time because somebody thinks that that's a good move to make. Because as we have seen, it has long-term consequences to the professionalism, to the expertise, and to the capacity of the public service to indeed effectively carry out and monitor the work that is being done. And I am glad to see the Deputy Minister here because I want to emphasize the fact that it is with Deputy Ministers that this committee conducts its work. So just in the interest of contrast, I would like to ask what role does the Minister or the Minister's office play in selecting bidders?
Thank you very much for the question. Zero role. So in terms of what the minister does, procurement from a PSPC perspective, fair, open, and transparent, and there is a very clear delineation between what is done in the public service and what is discussed with the minister. The minister is briefed on outcomes of procurement, focus on the fairness and the transparency of various elements, and on things that we're doing to improve in procurement. We are very much interested in procurement modernization. He's been briefed on various elements of that. Having discussions on what we can do for better vendor performance management, for better integrity, how we do price substantiation, what are the risk mitigation controls. Those are appropriate roles for the Minister of Public Works. I mean, there's various elements here, and as I noted earlier, there's been a lot of delegation of responsibilities to ensure there's no political interference. Thank you.
Please continue, because I'm very concerned about that. I think Canadians want to be reassured that there is no political interference with the procurement process and indeed any investigations that come thereafter, because any manner of harmful effects could arrive. Please continue.
There is a lot of emphasis put on this in terms of the quality of our briefing, ensuring that Minister is aware of things that are happening where a decision has been taken. When there are active procurements, there is a prohibition to meet on various elements. If meetings occur, they are always with a public servant official present. We put a focus on fairness. We have fairness monitoring. So we really take this very seriously, and the ministers have all been very serious and aware and alive to this issue. I would also note, for example, when we were doing vaccine procurement, we all signed additional over and above our regular conflicts of interest. We had both the public sector and the the Minnow and the ministers all sign off to ensure that there was due diligence being done, there was controls to separate the political and public sector aspects.
Well, thank you. And on that note, it was
Upcycle Garage, how are you? I missed
reported that the current minister was not briefed on Arrivecan as part of the hot issues section of his transition binder. Now, PSPC has had 7 ministers over the last 10 years, so it would seem to me that your department has experience with transition. Not everything can be continued, can be included in the binder, but can you tell us about how those priority issues are triaged?
Shanahan thinks
prepared?
she talks out of her nostrils.
Thank you very much for the question. I think that it's reasonable to say that, the binder is to provide an overview of the key issues in front of the department. We at PSPC do more than procurement. We are the Receiver General of Canada. We do the translation for the Government of Canada. We do defense procurement. There are many we are the custodian of real property. So there is a whole slew of things that need to be briefed and provided in terms of legislation acts. And in that first run-up of July, we wanted to focus on what was immediate, as you indicated.
Yes, and indeed, Deputy Minister,
Shanahan,
with the fact that not a single question was raised about the issue by the opposition in question period.
Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. That is your time. You are well over. Thank you very much.
Oh well, you've been good with the time, Chair.
I have. I think I gave Miss Bradford well over a minute, but that does not mean I extend it to every minister, every minister, and every member.
Insists on being
government side
spoiled.
has many more time slots. You'll be able to return
Listen to what she's saying
this.
right now.
Turning now beginning our third round. Turning now to Ms. Kuzi, you have the floor.
There we go. Stephanie Kuzi,
Mr. Genuous.
round 2.
Pardon me.
It's pretty fun.
Turning to Mr. Genuous, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I want to ask specifically about Liberal Minister of Procurement,
also just really
Jean-Yves
good.
Duclos. We've just heard some questions about the role of the minister. We're supposed to have a system of ministerial accountability, but you've just said that the minister effectively has no role in actual procurement. Given that his title is Minister of Procurement, I'm just trying to understand, what does Jean-Yves Duclos do all day?
Hey, Elizabeth, what's up? How are you?
Thank you very much for the question. Just to clarify, I was speaking about active procurement where there's open bids.
Okay, so when it comes to Arrivecan, you have the decision made, you have the ensuing problems and scandals, the policies related to it. Your department advised CBSA that there are problems here. Are we to believe that all throughout this process, not just while the bid is actually open, but all throughout this process, there is no role for the minister or the minister's office?
Thank you very much for the question. I think it might be helpful just to give a little bit of a historical context. So
just have to be very brief because I have 5 minutes.
I'll be very brief. I'm very respectful in the sense that I try to answer the questions very quickly.
Okay, I'll interrupt in 30 seconds.
When the first contracts were being let, there was no mention of Arrivecan. So any briefing that was being provided to the minister at that time was all hands on deck. Every department needs certain additional support to keep everything open, including the border. So that would have been that level of briefing. As Arrivecan became more of a bespoke name things, briefing started to come more into that area. In 2022, there was QPNOs. This is a traditional way to brief. You ask about the Minister Duclos. Minister Duclos has been briefed on many different aspects of it. You ask about what is the responsibility of the Minister of PSPC. We have everything from the security to contract integrity. These are areas of
okay. Now I'm going to jump in. Thank you, and you'll have a chance to respond again. But since the pandemic started, there have been 4 Liberal ministers of procurement: Anita Anand, Philomena Tassi, Helena Jasek, and now Jean-Yves Duclos. 4 ministers in about 4 years.
Bunch of losers.
Is it reasonable to assume that all 4 of them have been briefed about either Arrivecan or the Arrivecan project before it had that name?
It's bad.
And then is the process of engaging ministers, are they actually providing policy direction? Are they raising concerns about aspects of the process? Because you talked a lot about ministers being briefed about things, but I would expect it's not just a one-way dialogue where you're sort of telling the spokesman for the department what to say if it comes up in the House of Commons, but they're actually providing some kind of direction or raising concern about things that they're hearing. So can I assume all 4 were briefed to some extent at certain points in time? And at what points did they offer responses, raise policy concerns, suggest adjustments in direction, et cetera?
I cannot speak in detail to the first 1 or 2. When I became associate deputy and deputy minister, I have more familiarity with the briefings. They were briefed, engaged on the issues that we're facing now, and what is the plan? Is the procurement ombudsman engaged? Is the AG engaged? These are the kind of discussions that are going on in terms of, is there a substantive issue? How is it being fixed? What are the risk mitigation strategies? What are the considerations?
Okay, so they were briefed, they asked questions. You're not really describing a process in which the minister is coming in and saying, well, there's a problem here, you need to fix this. You're not describing a system in which ministers are providing direction. You're just describing a system in which ministers are briefed and then asking questions. Would you say that ministers were actively providing corrective direction on policy issues throughout the process, or were ministers being briefed and asking questions about what you were doing as a department?
Thank you very much for the question. It's an interesting question that you asked, because the financial delegations and the accountabilities rest with the CBSA. So when we're briefing a minister of PSPC, we're providing some procurement observations, but on the spend, on the record keeping, on the controls, on whether or not the app
ma'am,
works.
you understand my point, though. You're providing information to a person whose title is the Minister of Procurement, and we have a system in which Canadians expect that minister to take responsibility for what happens in their department. But the way this is being framed, including by Liberal members, is that the minister is just sort of a passive passenger receiving briefings like students at a seminar, listening to what they're being told by the experts and asking interesting questions along the way.
Thank you.
Isn't that a problem?
Mr. Jennings, thank you. A brief response, please.
I would say Minister Duclos has taken an active role. Minister Duclos has been briefed by the Auditor General. We're looking at the whole issue and making sure that we have the direction set to move forward.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Ms. Khalid. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Oh, Lord. Oh, God, this is going to be brutal.
Thank you very much, Chair. I find it very interesting how hard the Conservatives are trying to tie this to a minister when he has heard time and time again from so many different department officials that there was no minister that was linked to this. So I'll leave that there, and I also wonder how much money the Conservatives have spent calling in committee meetings to find out and how
$60
they
million?
can scramble
I don't think.
to link this to a minister, to link this to some kind of big conspiracy, which clearly they're not finding. I wonder how many millions of dollars they're going to spend just to try to get their political points in. But I do also want to express how disappointed I was when I read the Auditor General's report.
I don't even know what to call it.
I don't want to see the lack of transparency within the public service, because I believe the thousands and thousands of people that are in the public service do really good work. And when things like this happen, it really impacts that whole trust within our public service, who we rely on a day-to-day basis in getting that work done. So perhaps I'll start by going back to the situation in 2020. And Ms. Reza, perhaps you can help us in understanding what was going on in procurement in 2020, and how did it differ from 2019?
Thank you very much for the question. It differed pretty significantly and radically. We doubled the contract value that we did in a year with the same amount of staff, and we did it in a position where, in mid-March we were negotiating services, and all of a sudden we were responsible for buying PPE for Canada, not just at the federal level, but to help the provinces and territories. And buying PPE for Canada, that was not for the faint of heart. I was front and center in that, working night and day with many other people who are working night and day, trying to build a supply chain that was able to pivot around the world, to be able to support the needs of Canadians, of hospitals. I mean, it was pretty incredibly intense. And every department coming, trying to seek the authorities they needed to be able to deliver critical services to Canadians. Add in vaccine procurement in a globally competitive environment, add in trying to have call centers,
hey Mitchell, what's up?
Freezers to keep vaccines, trying to work with a workforce that was exhausted, sick, trying to deliver services for Canadian society. It was a pretty intense period of time where a tremendous amount of work went on. And I think that I heard in your question that, the work that the public service is doing, this current situation that we're facing in procurement is shattering. And I think that,
is that an excuse, though?
Both the AG
is that a reason?
And the Controller General of Canada caution that not more rules are required. But as you heard my colleague indicate, we've already started to put in new rules. And we've started to enforce and do what we can to increase our due diligence. So it's going to be a very difficult way forward based on a year or 2 years of pandemic readiness in terms of PPE, vents, many different commodities that had to be built and a supply chain created where there was none before. So it's certainly a very difficult period. Thank you.
Thank you. And, you know, taxpayer dollars mean a lot. They mean a lot to me. They mean a lot to my colleagues, to every single member in this House, and how we use them. Now, as you're going forward in fixing a lot of these mistakes that have happened on this specific contracting, is there a way to get taxpayer dollars back? When are you able to do something about it?
Thank you very much for the question. The Government of Canada has different levers that it can use for restitution. We are in the process of, we are in midst consultation with our legal services to see what we can do across an array of measures. Thank you.
Thank you. And can you also kind of compare? So, I mean, during COVID, you spoke about this. There were so many contracts going on, whether it was for N95 masks or vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. Did we see similar procurement practices in all of these other contract negotiations as well?
Thank you very much for the question. No, we did not. And I want to add something that I think is also very pertinent to the conversation. Because in 2020, it was such a difficult, turbulent time where so many things were happening, we actually took an unprecedented measure of sending out a conflict of interest form to all procurement officers and all senior officials at the PSPC, asking them if they had any conflicts of interest with the firms that we were doing business with. We did that, I think, 2 or 3 times in 2020, and we have 1,000 COIs on record, and we actually asked them because at that time, Dalian, GC Strategies, and Coratics were in the mix of companies that we were doing business with for this CBSA application, and we received nil responses.
Thank you very much. Suivant, c'est Monsieur Lemire encore pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Mr. Lemire, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson. How is it that the department in charge of procurement wasn't aware of contracts awarded by various departments that it's supposed to offer advice to? There's something that fascinates me here. How is it that GC Strategies could rack up contracts at the same time as having only 2 people under their employ? Is there a sense of panic in the department when it comes to awarding those contracts without a proper verification process of the whole broad issue? That's a very interesting question. As I said earlier, there's only a small number of contracts that are awarded on this basis.
Thanks,
Most
Mike.
contracts
Cool.
are awarded
We'll
by
be here
departments
every day.
and
Canadian federal politics
themselves.
right here.
And the onus is on them to engage in proactive disclosure. And that is a responsibility under the Treasury Board Secretariat's directives. Well, it's important for GC Strategies for us to remember, this isn't a company that came out of nowhere. It had qualified and was pre-qualified under the supply arrangements and had met a certain number of criteria in terms of its financial capacity, its previous experience. So they didn't just come out of the blue or out of left field. They had a history, a track record of previous contracts. So I'm not trying to defend the company, but I just want to put all of this in context, in the proper context. So I just wanted to bring that point to the table concerning GC Strategies. Well, given the context, Arrivecan had to be developed. How is it the big players in IT didn't bid in this process? How is that possible? Response. Well, I'd like to refer back to a comment I made early in the meeting. The CBSA identified only one single supplier that had the capacity to help them. They had the requisite experience to prepare a new app of this kind. And the second point I'd like to make is this. There's competitive procurement and non-competitive procurement. There were other suppliers that reported an interest, but they decided not to bid. Thank you.
Suivant, next up is MP Idlout. You have the floor again for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Deputy Minister's response earlier indicates to me that she has received guidance about the importance of reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, including in procurement. So my next questions will be to seek whether that reaches measures in subcontracting. Mr. Yao has claimed to be very busy finding vendors in order to fulfill the contract he received. So my first question is, what is the process to ensure benefits are still delivered to Indigenous peoples when contracts are awarded to Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs that intend to subcontract those services?
Thank you very much. I'm going to ask my head of procurement to respond.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. President. I would say that an excellent question that is being raised. This question would have, unfortunately, to be directed to Indigenous Service Canada. They're the one basically responsible to establish the criteria in terms of, I know that there's a 51% ownership requirement in terms of, making sure that there are economic implications for the communities. This is something also that is within their purview, so I wouldn't want to comment on their behalf.
What kind of arrangement do you have with Indigenous Services Canada to make sure that those measures are being followed?
Thank you for the question, Mr. President. So Mr. Chair, we are in touch with them. I know that they're actively looking into this. They're looking at the Indigenous Business Directory. Maybe they're reviewing some of the rules. So I know that they're basically quite seized with the question these days.
And if I could add, we also do Indigenous benefit reports in various fields. So, for example, here on Parliament Hill for the construction we're doing, we have a report on this area as well as in defense procurement. So we try to capture it in various elements and make it accessible and make it known what our expectations are.
Thank you. Probably my last question. Could you provide the details of how Delegated followed the process to ensure that some contracts were awarded to other Indigenous businesses and entrepreneurs?
Thank you very much. We'll take that we'll take that question and provide it to the Indigenous Services Canada. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Going now to MP Barrett. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yeah, thanks very much. I want to pick up where we were before. 635. What was the term that you used for them, Deputy Minister?
Companies, they're the professional services providers.
Professional services providers. Okay. So these 635 companies are not executing on the actual work, as you detailed in the questions from my colleague. They're middlemen, so they're middlemen. They're not executing on it. They're just finding resources and providing them. The Auditor General found that one of them, GC Strategies, wrote an RFP for the government, effectively to the exclusion of anyone else, but their own company. Is that common practice?
No, it is not.
How many other occurrences of that are there in the Government of Canada?
Thank you for the question. First, when we saw this in the AG's report, we also immediately picked up the phone to talk to the Auditor General because we were obviously unaware. We have since referred the matter to the RCMP as well. I know that seems to be the door that goes to, but we take these matters very seriously. When bid material is being prepared, as was discussed yesterday in the committee, there's an attestation that says, have you been involved in this? Because it precludes you from bidding on the work. So there's a lot of bells and whistles that are required. And in terms of your exact question, I'm going to ask Catherine, who has a responsibility in security, to advise us if you have any information on data.
So I'd like to offer a precision on my question before you respond. 635 companies. The Auditor General looked at one program and found one of the contractors was doing this. How many other companies do you suspect have engaged in this, and are you certain that there are no other occurrences of these middlemen writing their own contracts?
Thank you very much for the question. We can't be certain. What we do is we spend time looking at fraud, detection, data mining, and constantly auditing the various elements of it. Catherine?
Merci. Donc, merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairperson. So we do have a preventative and detection and early response framework to certain allegations that are brought before us. So as soon as there is an allegation, we look closely to see if there is documentation to support the allegation. Then we conduct an analysis to determine if there's evidence to substantiate the allegations. Now, if we arrive at that stage, we then refer the file to the internal investigative branch of the department so that they can move forward with the formal investigation of those allegations that have been laid. If we find criminal intent or action, we refer this file on to the RCMP.
Thank you very much. I will circle back to that, but I just want to revisit with you, Deputy Minister. So you've said specifically with respect to this issue on the request for proposal being authored by the bid winners, GC Strategies, that matter was referred to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police? So, Chair, her mic didn't turn on. Would you
repeat that? I didn't miss that as well, yeah.
Mic didn't
It should
turn
go
on,
on
but I just wanted
automatically,
to
yes.
confirm that she said yes.
Yes, it has been.
Okay. So, Ms. Poulin, previously you talked about being reasonably suspicious of the conduct of GC Strategies, that you were gathering evidence. Are there additional matters or additional files that you have transferred to the RCMP with respect to GC Strategies?
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairperson. We have a number of reviews and administrative investigations underway.
Yes,
we take
how
all
are
the
you?
information that's provided to us seriously by the CBSA, the Auditor General's report, as well as the Ombudsperson's report. So we've analysed all of these files, and certain steps of the preliminary investigation are underway
Greg,
to
what's up?
validate
How are
the
you?
allegations that have been brought to our attention. As soon as we have adequate evidence to substantiate those allegations, and that's part and parcel of our process, then to transfer the information to the RCMP.
You at this point transferred any information to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police as a result of those reviews?
Donc, nous avons transféré
We've transferred the same file that the Deputy Minister just alluded to. So we shared our concerns with the RCMP as to the fact that a supplier was working on its own statement of work.
Suivant. Next, it's Ms. Yip. You have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you.
No.
Thank you,
this
Ms. Reza, and your department
I don't have
for
a
your
deep
tremendous
dislike for this
efforts
one,
during
but
the pandemic.
it's also hard to like her at the
Auditor
same
General
time.
looked at contracting for PPE as well
That
as
soft
for
voice doesn't
vaccines.
fool
Can
me,
you remind
like-
us of her findings on the contracts for these two categories?
I
Doing good,
think I
Greg,
might
thanks.
answer that question.
Did I miss you earlier?
In terms of
Were you in here earlier?
the vaccines, we commented on the
It's hard to
fact
keep
that
track of all
the
the
government
people.
was able to
It just
mobilize
is,
and get
like-
sufficient vaccines for every Canadian to be vaccinated if they wanted to be vaccinated. Our concern related to making sure that there was best value, and indeed in a highly competitive environment, we signaled that it was a challenge for the government. Obviously, with respect to the earlier audit of personal protective equipment, PPE, we had similar findings that the government had mobilized to make sure that the PPE needed by Canadians was available.
Thank you. Ms. Reza, yesterday GC Strategies had its security certification suspended, which means it's ineligible from bidding on any contracts with security requirements. Why take this step now?
Thank you very much for the question, Catherine.
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chairperson. So as I explained earlier, we take very seriously all allegations that are brought to our attention when it comes to our suppliers and some of their bosses. Now, it's important to understand here that we have to substantiate those allegations with evidence, to have adequate evidence that they are not complying with the contract security arrangements. So, when we look at the allegations, we determine whether there's enough evidence to establish that one of the directors of GC Strategies was no longer compliant with the contract security program. So the first step in this case was to suspend the director's security clearance, and when that security clearance was indeed suspended, GC Strategies automatically fell into non-compliance with the contract security program, and that triggered the suspension of their own security clearance.
So what is the bar for suspending?
Merci beaucoup pour la question, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. There is
What's
no
up, Insulator? How are
bar
you?
per se. Each allegation must be looked at on its own merits to determine whether it is substantiated and if there are substantiating evidence. So sometimes if there's one allegation, we can confirm it by way of specific evidence. Now, let me now refer to the other security clearance suspension that occurred. We were informed of the fact that a senior director of a supplier had two jobs. He was, so this verification was very swift, and we got confirmation of this double dipping, and on the basis of that, and given the other evidence in the file, we determined that the director was no longer in compliance with the program, and we suspended his security clearance promptly. As far as GC Strategies is concerned, there are a number of allegations that were made, and the sum total of the allegations that was substantiated resulted in the fact that the senior director fell into non-compliance and his security clearance was suspended as a result.
Thank you. A very significant issue that the Auditor General's report identifies is the terrible lack of documentation. Supporting, as we all know, supporting documents were either not kept with the appropriate file or, in some cases, not kept at all. PSPC expanded the new electronic procurement system last year. Can you tell us more about the system and whether you believe, had it been in use for this project, would it address some of the concerns around the document retention?
Thank you very much for the question. I want to start by saying that this is a recommendation that we also saw in OPO in terms of the documentation on the PSPC side, what we need to do better. Dominique is going to talk to it in a moment, but I just want to be unequivocal. This is about due diligence and ensuring that we have the right documents on file so that when the auditors come in, Parliament, Canadians, there's a clear thread to the decision making. So we're really going to double down going forward on due diligence. I think you heard my colleague earlier talk about some of the measures we're taking to have greater price substantiation, cost control, decisions, the functions that are being associated with the task authorizations, meticulously recorded. But there is an additional wrapper around that, and that is the e-procurement system, taking what has been traditionally paper across the system and putting it into a procurement system that's online, digital, that's going to give us a lot of different various elements, including security, audit, and
So it was launched in 2018. So
sorry, Mr. Port, we're going to have to come back to this. So I'm well over. I appreciate it, but there is time remaining for members to pick this up again, and I'm sure they will. Turning now to Ms. Kuzi, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
I always like Stephanie Kuzi. I don't know why.
Thank you.
She's a
very
favorite
much,
of the channel. People like her.
Mr. President or Mr. Chair, very much appreciated. Before I get into my questions, I just want to say to Canadians and to all of the Liberal members, on this committee, the ministers are inexplicably implicated in overseeing these projects. That's what a minister is for, to oversee the spending of taxpayer dollars. That is their job, to oversee all these things. It would be impossible not to implicate the ministers in these projects and in the outcomes that are received or in not received, this case not received for Canadians. It is impossible to not imply the ministers, to not implicate the ministers here. I want to make that absolutely clear. Team of the Auditor General, you did a report on government benefits modernization and found that it was over budget by $3 billion. Is that correct?
I don't remember the exact number, but we did find that there was over budget that was happening.
Okay. And would it be fair to say that this is the largest IT modernization program in Canadian history? Would that be an accurate comment?
It is certainly a large one when you consider the fact that it's dealing with CPP, EI, and other major benefit programs for Canadians.
And would it be fair to say, based upon what we've seen with the creation of Arrivecan, that this project is largely based on IT outsourcing?
I think that's evident from the way that the contracts have been running. We identified in the report that there was a heavy reliance on external contracts instead of the public service, and that over time there should have been an analysis of how to move that work to the public service.
So then it would be fair to say that for this project, the largest project in the history of Canadian government, that the Canadian government is using outsourcers such as GC Strategies and others. Would that be a safe assumption in this case?
Hey, Dave, what's up?
Just to be clear on my last answer, I was referring to the Arrivecan audit. In terms of the benefits delivery modernization, I think as we heard from the Chief Information Officer in December, it is important to rely on external contractors.
You better not be one of those
work.
Jewish
The real question
Stillbergs.
is making sure that there is a rationale for
Just kidding.
Using
Obviously.
external contractors versus the public service, and identifying when things should be done by the public service.
But essentially, this project, the largest IT project in Canadian governmental history, is the same process that was used for Arrivecan is being used for this project. Would you say that's accurate?
I don't think I'm in the best place to comment on that. I think perhaps what I might turn this over to the Deputy Minister, but before
I was
I do,
only kidding.
I would
I
mention
really
that
was
the
only kidding.
Arrivecan
Like,
application development happened in the
I'm
context
glad
of the
Dave's in the
pandemic,
room.
where national security exceptions may have been available. I don't believe that the situation is on all fours with the benefits delivery modernization.
No, that's fine, Mr. Hayes. I'll continue with my questioning. So, but would you say it's possible then that the benefits modernization that was completed, a report was completed by your office where they saw it was a $3 billion, we're not even talking 54 million, 60 million, but a $3 billion overrun. It's safe to say that it could be as a result of the same model that Arrivecan is being based upon. Would there be any truth to that statement at all? Or would this possibility exist that what we see with Arrivecan, 60 million minimum, could be used for this largest project ever in the history of Canadian government in IT that currently is at a $3 billion overrun? Is that possible?
Well, I'm having a difficult time making the connection between the two projects. What I would say is that some of our findings in the Arrivecan audit would be important for the departments that are involved in benefit delivery modernization, including the importance of making sure that competitive procurement is used as much as possible, including the fact that documentation for decision making should be clear and concise on the file.
Yeah, I don't think it is difficult to make the connection because we have this $50 million, $60 million Arrivecan application. I think it's very easy to apply it to
Just-
these
point of
services.
order. Just
and I'm
one-
sure
just-
IT
Ms. Kuzi,
ministers
I've
are
stopped the clock.
salivating at the prospect of
Ms.
$3
Kuzi,
billion
I have a point of
in
order.
overruns.
I will return the floor
Thank
to
you, Mr.
you
President.
shortly.
The witness has been answering the question, and we've seen this already from the Conservative members, that witnesses are answering questions clearly, and they are characterizing and
yes.
misquoting the officials.
This isn't a point of order.
Thank you. Well, Ms. Shannon, there was no
You guys were
misquoting.
watching
They're
all of that,
engaged
right?
in a discussion. Ms. Kuzi, you have.
Do you think
the floor.
Shanahan's being dishonest there?
You have the floor for about 20 seconds for your closing
discussed.
remarks, please.
Yeah,
We've got
thank
to
you very
talk
much,
about
Mr.
it.
President. I think that it's very evident. Any individual knows if you take a sample size of something, you can apply it to a larger subset. Say, for example, polls.
All
you
right.
can take a small poll and
We're doing this just for a second because these cookie monsters.
So after that one cookie, me make 2, then 3, then 4. Cookie, 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 me no longer just a rookie. Cause once me ate one cookie, me want more and more and more.
Mr. Speaker.
Sorry, guys, back to it.
apply to a larger subset. Just one thing as an example, and I think that we would find that as well, that the mismanagement that we have seen in Arrivecan could potentially, is being used in this larger subset of this largest project in the history of Canadian IT government projects.
Thank you very much,
Mr. President. Thank you, witnesses.
Ms. Bradford, you have the floor for 5 minutes, please.
Oh, no.
She's not the worst. I am going to, because I just have to leave for a ministerial announcement.
I watch it every day,
MP,
like for the last 7
Ariel
months.
has stepped up. So coverage is here. The floor is yours, Brenda, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chair. Again, I want to take this time to thank the Deputy Minister and the entire procurement team for really stepping up during those early days of the pandemic when we really, the world was in a health crisis, never before seen in 100 years, and all hands were on deck to make sure that we first had the PPE equipment, and remember how desperate people were to obtain that protection equipment, as well as ensuring that we were collecting the right information to adequately quarantine people until such time as we got the vaccines. And we heard from the Deputy Auditor General how those vaccines were obtained and they were distributed across the country and lives were saved. So thank you very much again to the procurement team. Now, I think that it's fair to say that a general common thread to most of the recommendations that we are hearing from the procurement ombudsman and the AG when it comes to PSPC is that you play a greater oversight role in contracting by client departments. And this is something that I believe your department accepts, and we have heard testimony that you are so doing. Generally speaking, delegated authorities to other departments and public servants is meant to make the process more efficient and reduce bottlenecks. And we did hear some concerns from the AG yesterday, the Auditor General, that she was concerned about access by especially smaller suppliers. And we can think of
Thanks for tuning in, Greg. We'll catch you tomorrow. See you later, buddy.
To a system that may then become overregulated. But obviously there needs to be accountability. So I wonder if you can speak a bit from your perspective to find the balance between oversight and efficiency, as both are obviously very important.
Thank you very much for the question. I think it's a super relevant question. I've been working at PSPC since 2016, and all through 2017, 2018, we really focused on how to simplify procurement. And we came to OGO, and we were able to be witnesses. We were able to take some great recommendations that were put forward by OGO in terms of how do you debundle the federal procurement system to make it more accessible to Canadian SMEs. Canada has a huge portion of its economy based on SMEs, and so we've spent the last 5 years looking at supplier diversity, making sure that our procurement practices are inclusive, working on figuring out how to reduce barriers, how to make it less burdensome. You've heard probably ad nauseum about the e-procurement system, but imagine every time you want to compete, you got to fill in paperwork, you got to show your certifications, your ISO standards you have to complete, and every time you miss putting in that certification, you're screened out. So by at least having the e-procurement system, we're hoping that that's going to be a level playing field for SMEs to have quicker and easier access. But at the same time, I think we are struggling, and based on what we've seen here as well, on do we have the right strategy to debundle procurements? Where are we introducing risk? Where are we introducing complexity? So how do we take all those considerations and create that balance so that we're able to deliver services? We've heard a lot of different reports spoken about recently or cited from the AG. One of the ones that I was reviewing last night was the recent one on IT projects, and I think it's the one that was just referred to. But in that context, the fundamental issue for the Government of Canada is most of our systems are decades old. They're built in-house, they're not paper-based, they have reliances. So how do we move to a digital transformation to be able to deliver services to Canadians? And how do we see SMEs as part of that? So these are the areas that we're grappling with. And while I still have the floor on this, I would also raise to the table's attention is that I believe that procurement is one spoke, but the other spokes are the government's HR practices, staffing practices, so we can bring in people quickly with the right skill sets. But fundamentally, as a deputy head, I really focus my attention on project management. I think that's a key piece of the equation that we need to talk about. It's a key part of the financial delegations and how the money is being spent and how things are being prévoyé, planned for, so that when we do procurement processes, they're actually meeting the timelines and that they're properly planned. So if you're buying something and you're not increasing through amendments the contract value exponentially. So I'll just pause here.
Thank you very much. That is the time for Ms. Shanahan. Maintenant, c'est M. Lemire encore une fois.
Mr. Lemire, once again, 2.5 minutes, please. Thank you very much.
Doing pretty good, Joan.
Ms.
My
Poulin,
back is acting
Ms.
up,
Rizza,
so that kind of sucks. But
stage,
besides
should
that,
we review the policies and
that'll straighten
regulations
itself
on
out in a couple of
contracting
days.
that favour First Nations? Does this particular situation call into question these contracts awarded to the First Nations? Is this a single occurrence or is it playing out in other spheres?
Merci pour la question, Monsieur le...
Thank you very much for the question, Mr. Chair. Well, our department is following what's being reported in the media and the fallout, and we must underline the fact that this is not our top responsibility. We're in contact with the organisation that is fully apprised of the situation at hand. These are not changes that can be rushed through either. We need to be careful here. There's an unfortunate event that occurred that has made headlines, but what I can tell you, given that we're not the department responsible for updating the policies themselves for being registered on the list, we ensure that our contracts do comprise as great a component, Indigenous component as possible, and we're proactive in that sense, but it's not exactly within our purview. That said, I can tell you that the department is very much aware of the situation. Well, that's fascinating. If you want to award contracts to Indigenous companies and yet it's non-Indigenous people that are performing the work, that's not meeting the objective. Question. Now, as far as the CBSA is concerned, they could have excluded other suppliers. When can we get more information in that regard? Was there any criminal intent that you've determined as part of your criminal investigations that should be brought to the attention of the committee at this stage? Response. Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairperson. As I mentioned earlier, we have received 3 reports over the last couple of months from the CBSA and also the conclusions drawn by the Auditor General as well as the Ombudsperson on procurement. So we're going over that information with a fine-tooth comb, and we're also looking to see if it correlates with other information from our internal investigations. we need to substantiate the allegations and see if there's other supporting evidence, and then to conduct a comprehensive review of that. Now, once we reach the conclusion that there is criminal intent, or we then refer the file over to the RCMP. Now, that said, any allegations regarding the supplier and their own statement of work is something of concern to us. And oftentimes we share that information with the RCMP earlier rather than later. Question. Sorry to cut you off, Mr. Lemire, your time has run out.
Next up, we have Ms. Idlout again. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes, please.
I'm not entirely convinced by the Deputy Minister's responses regarding the uniqueness of what happened in COVID-19, because there have been other world epidemics, pandemics, like most recently SARS and H1N1. So I think that there have been recommendations that must not have been implemented to allow for such drastic failures by this Liberal government in the Arrivecan. Secondly, I wanted to mention the continual failure of this Liberal government regarding Indigenous peoples in terms of contracting as well, because as I said earlier, the Nutrition North program is a major failure that's supposed to help alleviate poverty, but the way that it's contracted out is another indication of whether meeting Indigenous people's needs is actually at the forefront of this Liberal government. I point very easily to the fact that Nutrition North is supposed to alleviate poverty, but the Northwest Company has profited $119 million in 1 quarter, and in that same 1 quarter, they've received a $61 million subsidy from the federal government. I'd like to ask the Auditor General what policies and procedures are needed to strengthen contracting procedures, especially when it's supposed to benefit or alleviate things like poverty among Indigenous peoples.
Thank you for the question. Just before I dig into that answer, I would signal that that the member's point about the pandemic and previous experiences like SARS was indeed a matter that we raised in our pandemic preparedness report. We said that there were long-standing known issues that should have been dealt with long before this pandemic presented itself, and we hope that the government has learned from those lessons. In terms of policies for procurement, to make sure that that there is a good service for Indigenous
how are you?
people, and indeed the Nutrition North program, what I would say is that that is a matter that comes down to the departments responsible for those procurements, making sure that the requirements and the services that are needed are clearly articulated in the contract documents, whether they be in the request for proposal or the ultimate contracts that are signed with those organizations. Again, tying this to our Arrivecan work,
Tigor,
this is
what's
exactly
up?
why we made the recommendations that deliverables and costs be captured in documentation and included in the contracts.
Thank you very much. That is the time. Turning now to Mr. Genuis, who is our second last
Doing pretty good
questioner.
here. Watching some
and then we have
scandalous
Shanahan,
liberal
and that's your wrap.
activity.
Mr. Genuis,
Like,
you have the floor for 5.
Thank you, Chair. There are so many different parts to this Arrive scam scandal. One of them is this fundamental fact revealed by the Auditor General's report that the process was rigged, that people who had been predestined by the government to get a contract sat down with government officials to determine the terms of the request for proposals, which they would then bid on. It's a rigging of the process, a predestining of the process. And we believe in free will, not predestination. We think everyone has an opportunity based on their decisions and actions to access government contracting if the system is working properly. But it's no wonder with this kind of system that outsourcing has increased 60% under these Liberals when we have deals that are rigged. My first question to Ms. Reza, have those involved in this Arrive scam rigging been identified and held accountable?
very much. As we have both indicated, we have referred the matter to the RCMP.
Have you identified which individuals were involved in this discussion on the government side?
Catherine?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for the question. So, based
Let's
on the
get
information
some
we
likes for
received,
Garnet. Everybody likes
there's
Garnet, right? Like
some
he's so
information
smart.
on suppliers,
Like,
some on employees. We're
can just
completing
tell.
our analysis to determine whether the action that was taken in the employees' work was a problem or whether there was an anomaly, and this analysis is being completed.
You're saying you're doing work to identify whether or not there was a problem. The Auditor General's report was very clear on this. Maybe I'll just go to Mr. Hayes. Were you able to identify in the process of your work the individuals that were responsible for this bid rigging? And can I ask you as well, are you aware of other instances across government where this practice has occurred?
Answering the second question first, there aren't other examples where we have seen that has happened. However, I think I will say unequivocally it shouldn't happen. There shouldn't be contractors involved.
Hey, Dive Crew, what's up, buddy? How are you?
For the contracts that they
Good to see
ultimately bid on in a competitive process. In terms of the question about the RCMP, we did have a conversation with the RCMP where we identified that that we had information that they may be interested in. All of our files contain the information available from the departments and the analysis that we've done, so the RCMP can see from our files exactly who has been involved from our perspective.
Okay, so you do have on your files indications of which individuals were part of this rigging process, and yet what we're hearing from government officials is that they're still investigating.
Doing well here,
Ms.
man.
Reza, do you
My
want to
back's a
comment on
little
that?
crooked.
If Mr. Hayes has that information, presumably you do as well.
Besides that happens a
I might
couple
just
times
add,
a year.
we did provide some information to the committee, I believe
Getting
it was
through
on
it, no
Tuesday,
problem.
that shows some of the information about where and how the company was involved in setting the requirements for the contract. I believe that I'll turn it back over.
Sorry, I am tight for time. Just in the time I have left, very quickly, Ms. Reza, other instances where this rigging of contracts has occurred.
I'm not aware of any, but I'll turn here because we
Okay,
actually post
can
them.
you tell us that hasn't happened in any other cases, or you're just unsure?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Chairperson. So as I mentioned earlier, we have an internal investigatory team. There are a number of files that are referred to that team on a yearly basis. There are many topics of investigation that can be referred to us. I don't think this is the first time that we've heard of the fact that there may have been conduct on the part of a supplier in a particular process. That said...
Sorry, again, just because of time, it seems like you're saying that there are other instances that may be being investigated, and I think we'll need more information on that. In the time I have left, I want to move a motion that the committee report to the House that invites the President of the Treasury Board, Anita Anand, to appear for no less than 2 hours in relation to the Arrive scam study, and that this meeting occur within 3 weeks of this motion being adopted. Having moved the motion, I will now speak to it.
Just
a point of order, Chair.
Hold on just 1 second. I just want to consult with the clerk, Mr. Junior. First, I'll hear the point of order from Ms. Shanahan, please.
Yes, Chair, I call again. We're having a stunt sprung on us by Mr. Genuis, and I call for a suspension of this meeting. Please suspend the meeting so that we can discuss and receive the motion.
Yeah, yes. So you're reading my mind. I'm just going to consult with the clerk for a second. Just hold on, please. All right. I see hands going up. Ms. Genuis, you've not. Yes, Ms. Genuis, you're back. But first, I'm going to suspend for 5 minutes. I'm going to give our witnesses a chance to stretch their legs because you're not excused yet, unfortunately. I'm hoping this will go relatively quickly, but you never know with committees. So I will suspend for 5 minutes. Then I will come back to Mr. Genuis, and then I will proceed with the speaking list. So this meeting is suspended for 5 minutes.
All right, guys. So I'm not sure what these next 5 minutes are going to look like. I know we're going to do something with them. So what are we going to do, Ehren? going to do this. We're going to do this. Quick interruption. They're taking a couple of minute break so everybody else here can go and pee or whatever, use the washroom, or whatever you need to do, get supper started or whatever. But I want to show this. This is from my friend Dive Crew Canada, who's been a friend to so many people on this channel. If you're a member of this channel, it's probably because Dive Crew Canada hooked you up. But he sent me these badges. Like, they're three-dimensional. Like, these are like the patches or badges that you can sew on and then cut off and reuse again. And they're so cool. He sent me a number of them. And it was a big deal to me, man. My world's pretty small. And question period's a big part of it. But something else that he did send, and I wasn't asking or anything like that, because that's not how we do here. But he sent me this coffee mug that had the question period Canada logo and a subscribe icon at the bottom. It was amazing that he did this for me. And just really cool. Again, it meant a lot to me personally. And I'd like to share that with you. Like, some people must like question period a little bit. Like, Dive Crew perhaps is one of those people, but he's been helping me out so much. And I think maybe what attracts him to the channel is the community. We've got a lot of really cool, like-minded, just real people that want change in Canada. Like, the last few years have been so tough. Like, if you've not gotten a big raise in the last number of months, then you do feel the struggle, because everything is so much more expensive. Everything. Like, and the follow to that, like, wait until you have to pay car insurance again. That's going to be up like 20%. Just times are bad. And I love Question Period Canada, though, and I love getting cool things like this from really cool people that like to watch and just are interested in Canada and want to learn more about Canadian politics. Anyhow, we're going to jump back into the show. That 5-minute break's got to be up soon. No. I screwed it up. We'll get it back on track, guys. But oh no. So we're 206 in. Okay, we're back on track. We're back on track. Here we go. We're just jumping right back into it.
Ms. Kuzi and then Ms. Shanahan. Mr. Genuis, you. Oh, first, I would like to have UC to change the name of the program in the motion so it is Arrivecan. I'm not looking for discussion on this. I would just like your consent to do that. Any objections? Seeing none, it is Arrivecan in this motion that members are debating. Mr. Genuis, back to you. You're welcome to make your rhetorical flourishes on the floor, but not in the motions that this committee will consider. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. And next time I put Arrive scam in a motion, I will add the appropriate trigger warning at the end of the motion. I guess at the beginning of the motion would make more sense since it's a trigger warning.
That's not point of order. That's not necessary. We can have respectful adult conversations.
Ms. Shanahan,
Does she understand what a point of order is?
Ms. Shanahan, you're down on the list, and we will get to you. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I think we might need a remedial refresher on the standing orders and which standing orders you can invoke if you disagree with something someone is saying.
Just a point of clarification, that would apply to all parties, I think, over Mr. Genuis.
Absolutely, Chair, absolutely. Anyways, I did want to speak to this motion, which is a motion about asking the Minister of the Treasury Board to come before this committee to answer for what happened in the Arrive scam scandal. We've heard some discussion even at today's meeting about this issue of ministerial accountability. Are ministers accountable, and to what extent are ministers accountable for what happens in their government? Now, as far as I can discern, the best defense that Liberal members can muster of the government's action in the context of the Arrive scam scandal is to try to convince us that ministers of the Crown do absolutely nothing. That over 4 ministers of procurement since this pandemic started, that the ministers of procurement were not involved in setting policies, making decisions, giving direction as it relates to procurement.
Okay, just...
We heard yesterday from witnesses that ministers don't have anything to do with procurement.
Not
Minister does not have anything.
Okay,
When we hear
all right, Ms. Shanahan, you are down on the third. That's Ms. Shanahan, you are down to speak. This is a very valid debate. You're allowed me to speak to it now. The Deputy Minister has come in today and frankly made the Minister sound like he is a passenger in this voyage, not steering the ship. So that is why I think the opposition is raising this, but it is valid. And you're welcome to debate the merits of ministerial accountability in your turn, not as a point of order, which it is not. But you are third on the list. I always welcome points of order to guide me, but I ask that they be points of order. Mr. Genuis, you have the floor again.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal member is helpfully assisting me in precisely demonstrating the point that I was making. She's saying, come on now, the minister is not actually involved in making any decisions that have relevance to the procurement process. Perhaps the title Minister of Procurement is purely decorative. Mr. Speaker, Canadians expect better, though. Canadians expect ministers to take responsibility for things that happen within their department. Of course, we understand that ministers aren't involved in every specific decision that happens within their department, but they're responsible for establishing the culture, setting the policy frameworks, giving broad direction, and certainly insisting on remedial action when things are clearly starting to go off the rails, as was obviously happening in the case of the Arrive scam scandal for a long time. We've had 4 ministers of procurement in the last 4 years under these Liberals. I wonder if they should just formalize the process by designating a potted plant to be the 5th minister. A potted plant could receive briefings still, could be present in the department still, but would ostensibly have as much to do with actual procurement as the last 4 ministers have had.
Again,
I think it's...
I would go to language. I would go to language in describing other members of Parliament.
Miss Shanahan.
And it's called delegated authority.
Miss Shanahan, you'll be welcome to set the record.
On that point of order, Chair.
Just hold on, Mr. Genuis. Ms. Shanahan, that's not a point of order. You're interrupting. I try to avoid having members interrupt one another.
Hey, Mike, what's up?
We can sit here all day. No other committee is sitting today. We have infinite parliamentary resources to sit here. If you're going to interrupt, you're going to hear more from me, which will take away from your time. Mr. Genuis, if you have a point of order, I'd like to hear it. If you don't have a point of order, I'd like to get back to your time. Why don't you just go back to your time? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know that there's any history of the term potted plant being found unparliamentary. So I will underline the point that in our system of government, the public expects ministers to take responsibility, not to be specifically involved in the minutia of every small decision, but to be responsible for the policy, direction, the culture, the frameworks, the rules, and the adherence to the norms that the public expects. So if the Liberals' best defense of what happened in the Arrive scam scandal is to say the ministers don't have anything to do with what happens inside of government, I would submit that that is also a problem, that it is a problem either way. Now, that's to the general point around ministerial accountability. Of course, we need to hear from Minister Anand specifically in reference to an announcement that she made yesterday in reference to her work as president of the Treasury Board and the steps the government says it is taking in this regard. So I think it's very clear, in particular in the context of what we heard yesterday, both at committee and through the media, that hearing from Minister Anand is of particular importance. So this is why this motion was put forward today, I don't doubt that some members will not agree with some aspects of my commentary, but I hope that won't get in the way of support for a common sense motion to invite the President of the Treasury Board to appear before this committee and to speak about her work, the work of her department, and announcements and actions that she has spoken about. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Ms. Genuis. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor, please. And you're on mute. Before I begin, I will remind just members my comments on points of order applies to all members. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor. Over to you.
Oh, my apologies, Chair. I thought Ms. Kuzi was first.
Well, the hands went up and it was a photo finish. So I, in the sake of fairness, decided to go. I can move you down one if you like.
I am. Please, if you can, I'd love to hear what Ms. Kuzi has to say first. Thank you.
Ms. Kuzi,
really?
then Ms. Khalid, then Ms. Shanahan. Ms. Kuzi, over to you.
Not a fan of that little Khalid woman
I
at all.
believe my colleague, Mr. Genuis, has indicated the reasons for which the President of the Treasury Board should be present in front of this committee to account for well, not only her announcement yesterday, but her implication in the oversight of Arrivecan, Arrive scam going forward. But I also would like to get the President of the Treasury Board in front of the committee as well for another matter that was brought up here today by the Deputy Minister. As was indicated yesterday, we found out that an individual who is working with the public service has received a significant $8 million from the Arrive scam scandal. And the Deputy Minister herself today said that she has seen in her oversight the firing of 5 employees for failing to disclose conflict of interest. Well, Mr. President of this committee, you may remember that Life Labs was granted millions of dollars for COVID testing, and that the President of the Treasury Board did not disclose this to the Ethics Commissioner. Now, she did disclose other things, but prior to the pandemic, you'll be interested to know, Mr. President, that Life Labs, the company on which the President of the Treasury Board's husband sits on as a director, only received $150,000 in contracts prior to the pandemic. Only 3 contracts after the pandemic, where I will remind the committee that the current President of the Treasury Board served as the Minister of Procurement during that time. Life Labs received a contract for This is a number, Mr. President, that goes beyond the number we've been discussing here in Arrive scam. $66.3 million on June 23rd.
Sorry, Ms. Kuzi, I have a point of order from Ms. Yip.
Thank you.
Yeah, just
Ms. Yip has something to say.
Thank you, Ms. Yip. I think off the top, Ms. Kuzi does have wide latitude. Ms. Kuzi, back to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's very relevant because we
This
are
is a
calling
study
her.
on Arrivecan,
That's right, and
Just one second, Ms. Kuzi.
We're discussing conflicts of interest.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Mr. President.
Sorry, Ms. Kuzi, it's not my intent to cut you off, and I will let you finish up. I just wanted to. We are now actually debating the motion before us. So it's the Treasury Board President, Ms. Kuzi, you have the last words. I don't know if you wanted if you want it back again, or if I should move on.
Sure, no, I would like to continue.
Thank you.
I am providing another compelling reason that we need the President of the Treasury Board in front of
point of order, Chair.
Committee. Oh, it seems to me, Mr. President, that they are trying to interrupt
Yes,
me.
let me. I'll hear the point
thank
of
you so
Ms.
much.
Khalid. You
Okay,
are next.
go ahead, please, Mr. President.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I was just wondering if you wanted to excuse any witnesses that are in the room at this point, if that's okay. I know that we've gone over time, but I just wanted to make sure that they were not sitting.
Well,
Nothing about that woman looks real.
Ms. Khalid, you have
Like,
the
I know
last
she's a real
spot,
person,
so
but she
I
looks
will-
fake.
I'm ready to excuse
Like,
them if you like.
Fake eyebrows.
It is-
They don't match.
I
Her
can
eyebrows
turn
are
to
all
government
like
members
off
or you in
center.
particular.
And
would you like me to excuse the witnesses?
who am I
I
to
think it
say?
would probably be best for us to excuse the witnesses. I don't want to keep them waiting.
Very good.
She tried adjourning this
Ms.
stuff
Reza,
earlier
Ms.
yesterday.
Hayes and your
Like,
team, thank you for coming in today. I appreciate it, and I too am pleased you are being excused so you can get on with your day. Thank you very much. We'll see you all again.
Is that the wrap up?
Ms. Kuzi, again, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think it's unfortunate that they're being excused because I think actually they would be interested and appreciative that I am actually bringing forward another rationale for the appearance of the President of the Treasury Board that is related to the action that they indicated that they took today on behalf of the information we found out this week about Dalian. So as I was saying, the President of the Treasury Board did not disclose to the Ethics Commissioner that her husband was a director on Life Labs. And as I mentioned previously as well, prior to the pandemic, only $150,000 in contract. Yet during the pandemic, as I was indicating,
Thank you,
before I
Mike.
was
That's
interrupted,
wild.
on June 23rd of 2020, $66.3 million.
I don't even know what to
was
say when
awarded
people
to
do that.
Life Labs. But it did not stop there, Mr. President. On
Thank
August
you.
20th, we saw an additional $1.9 million being awarded to Life Labs. And I say to all Canadians, and I would have said to the witnesses, were they still there, is it not accurate that the President of the Treasury Board, the individuals who oversees the public servant, who is supposed to be a leader, should set the standard, should be held to the same standard, to the same ethical code that this deputy minister, that we just dismissed, was so proud to indicate that she held
Hey,
5
Tigor,
members
thank
to?
you
So I
for
think this
tuning
is
in.
another very
We're here
compelling
all the
reason,
time.
Mr. Chair, that we have the President of the Treasury Board. In addition to the oversight, which, as I said previously, of ministers, which is inextricably connected to the outcomes, to the results, where we determined that Canadians did not receive value for money. This is another compelling piece of information, another compelling piece of evidence, as presented by the Deputy Minister here today in her actions, that also the President of the Treasury Board should be held to. So with that, Mr. President, I will conclude, and I would just encourage all committee members to support this motion for transparency, not only for the work that is done and the value of tax dollars for Canadians, but also to ensure that these ministers who are inextricably tied to their outcomes are also held accountable to the highest of standards. Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Ms. Khalid, over to you now, please.
Oh, she's a sack of
Thanks very much.
crazy
Chair.
cats.
I appreciate you and the time that we have to talk about this very important issue. First and foremost, I just want to be very clear. I have no issues with any minister coming before this committee to answer questions. I have no issues with holding members of our government, including bureaucracy, to account for what has happened here. What I am concerned about is efficiency. It's about how are we, just as we, like the Conservatives have really gone down this massive fishing expedition. Unfortunately, they haven't caught any fish so far. But I'm wondering.
This little chick is a criminal, guaranteed.
Mr. Barrett,
so
would you like to be
dishonest.
added to the speaking
Who
list?
trusts
Mr.
a
Barrett,
word
would
out
you
of
like
that
to be added to the speaking list?
person's mouth?
Back to you, Miss Khalid.
It's happening.
Yeah, I'm with you, Joan. I'm with
Thank
you.
you. I appreciate that, Chair. And to
full of-
Mr. Barrett, there is no fish
Whatever.
that has been caught here. As many as
Full of
thousands
eyebrows.
and thousands of hours that you guys have spent in trying to find something here that is passing your sniff test, and the fact that you keep on calling so many committee meetings on this tells me that you haven't really found anything. I think what we have found, and what we, all of us, all parliamentarians agree on, is that something happened here with the Arrivecan app that we need to make sure that bureaucrats are held responsible, that we want to make sure that the money that was paid out to these middle management folks is brought back into our government, and that Canadians have accountability for how their tax dollars are spent. What we are not finding here, regardless of all of your countless efforts, is that this was a ministerial sign-off, that the Prime Minister, for some reason, signed off on this. That is not what has happened here. And we've spent, what is it, 6,000
You need some
hours
little
on this
skank
so
like
far?
that to tell you how
Well,
life
let's
is?
talk about not finding anything for 6,000 hours, and what is 1 or 2 more hours
She
of the
kinda
Treasury
gets me
Board
riled up.
president
Like-
going to do to come in to say, all right, let
generally
me add to this
remain
6,000
emotionless when I watch
6,000
this stuff.
tally and
But I
millions
watch
of dollars
this,
of taxpayers, so the
and
conservatives
do you know how
can
many
go sniffing
little
and trying
girls
to find
in
something, and they haven't found anything.
India
What I
would
would
be looking up
appreciate
to
is
a
if we have public officials coming
piece
in
of
to talk about what the next steps are, to
work
talk
like
about how we
that,
can get our
like,
taxpayer dollars back,
a lot.
to talk about how we can fix
And
the
she's
process here.
dividing,
Can
distracting.
we not make everything political? I would really
find this
appreciate
chick a
if,
lot
if we're
to
not
watch.
just, trying to
Do you?
find those cheap
It can't
political
just be
wins
me.
in every
Like-
single thing that the conservatives are doing. Let's actually do something productive.
Let's
That's
actually
what
do
the
something
purpose
productive.
of the Public Accounts Committee
lot of the whole
is, Chair.
nation
And I really
here on
appreciate all of your
CPAC.
efforts
Like-
in making sure that we are trying to do our very best to hear from all the witnesses. But reality is, we still don't have a game plan. We've had so many meetings here in this committee. We still don't have a game plan as to what our next steps are within this committee. We can call 1,000,001 witnesses, but until and unless we as a committee decide, okay, this is how we are going to move forward, these are the recommendations that we are going to provide to our government, and this is what we need to do to make sure that something like this does not happen again, then why are we going down a wild goose chase? And again, I reiterate, I have no problems with any minister appearing before the committee. I think that it is ineffective. It is a waste of taxpayer dollars. It is a waste of all of the amazing people that are in the room right now making sure that this meeting happens. It's unfortunate, and I would hope that my colleagues would agree with me on this, and I know that my conservative colleagues are still going to go down this path of a witch hunt and try to find something that they can just take and
Wasteland,
run with.
how are you?
But at
How are
this
you, sir?
point, I think perhaps the best thing that we can do is, rather than having the minister come in, it would be to bring in the officials of the TBS back to talk about how we are going to move forward on this, how we are going to hold to account and make sure that this does not happen again in the future. So I would then move that amendment to say that we remove or we change the president of the Treasury Board to say, invite back officials from TBS.
It's the combination of youth and content, like the way that she talks down to us. Oh. Now, I don't know what's going on. The signal just cut.
Ms. Khalid, I'm going to rule that amendment is out of order because it changes the fundamental nature of the motion. You're welcome to bring that back forward.
I'm so sorry, Chair. I would love some clarification on why you think that's out of order. I mean, we don't, like I said in my remarks, we still don't have a work plan. We have no idea where we're going with this. We keep having meeting after meeting after meeting.
I've got
not just in
nothing but
public
love in
accounts,
my heart
but in
for
so many
all
other
different
committees
types of
across-
people
across
from
Parliament.
anywheres. I
So
don't care what
I don't
color
know
or
how you
whatever.
would
Be a
rule this
good
out of order
person,
if we don't even
and
know
I'll
what the
care about that.
purpose of all of this is.
This
At the end of
this
the day,
this
are we
woman
trying
is
to
not a
just
good
find
person.
something to link to ministers, to link to give political scoring points to our
Gets on my
conservative
nerves.
colleagues? Or are we trying to get to the bottom of
Because
this?
there's
And
a
if
lot
we
of
are trying to
kids
get to the
that'll be
bottom of
looking up to
find
this
next steps to provide
and thinking
solid
like, oh, I want to be
recommendations,
like her,
then how
which
is
is
this
like,
out of
oh, I
order?
want to be a liar and a distractor and a
It
divider.
fundamentally changes the motion. You're welcome to bring
So
it
is-
forward.
does that mean-
Miss Khalid, I allow you to speak. Please.
Someone needs to.
return the courtesy.
What would Jay-Z
You're
say?
welcome- You're welcome to bring it back if you want officials from any department to either appear or,
But I know
or
you can't
come
say that
back. This is
stuff.
about.
Like, and I don't even feel like
this
that,
is
except
about
that
calling a minister of the crown to
a
appear
person with
before
that much
this,
power
this-
shouldn't be
this
allowed
committee. So I'm
to
ruling,
use it
your amendment
recklessly.
out of
Like,
order. You still have the floor, and I have two other speakers.
Point of order,
reckless.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Before we continue on, I would like to challenge the chair's decision.
All right.
I'm not even a regular
going
member
on?
of this committee. What does Iker think about that?
Love it.
So I will turn things over to the clerk to call a vote. And if you could just again, to refresh everyone, the amendment that's being made. Just bear with us, everyone. C'est qui vote pour
Who's voting on behalf of the Bloc Québécois? Mr. Lemire, are you still with us? Good. Okie doke.
Actually, just to move things on, Ms. Khalid, could you repeat perhaps in the meantime, your amendment is to?
Thank you very much, Chair. My amendment is to change the wording, the President of the Treasury Board, to saying to invite back TBS, to invite back officials from the Treasury Board Secretariat.
Thank you very much. I'm going to have the clerk will now call a roll call on that. Over to you, please.
Shall the chair's decision be sustained? Mr. Van Bynen.
No.
Mr. Pawlowski.
No.
Ms. Khalid.
No.
Ms. Shanahan.
No.
Ms. Yip.
No.
Mr. Genuis.
Yes.
Mr. Barrett.
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi.
Yes.
Monsieur Lemire.
Oui.
Ms. Idlo.
Pangat po nga, yes.
5
Very good.
yeas, 5 nays.
Very good. Ms. Khalid, you still have the floor. Well, I think my vote is to sustain my ruling, obviously. Ms. Khalid, you have the floor. The motion stands as presented by Mr. Genuis, with the exception we've corrected it to Arrivecan. Ms. Khalid.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Appreciate that. And again, I'm a little disappointed that we don't have a clear pathway forward. I mean, what are we doing here? We're spending so many taxpayer dollars in finding resources, in what's the objective here? I mean, to me, in this committee, the objective is for us to find clear-cut recommendations in what the Auditor General's report was on Arrivecan, to take what she wrote in consideration and to find a way for us, with all of the witnesses that we have had, to put together some solid recommendations and say, hey, this is what needs to happen going forward to make sure that things like this do not happen again. This is what needs to happen to make sure that we are continuing to build the trust of Canadians in our democratic institutions. This is what needs to happen to make sure that we are able to bring back the money that was spent on this. This is what needs to happen to make sure that we find our fair value for the money that is spent going forward. And the fact that we don't have any of that and we keep on calling witnesses. I remember in December, I think it was December 12th, when all of us in this committee, well, the permanent members of this committee, I don't think any of whom are here today, but we spent over an hour working together to find out how we could find a consensus, how we could build that consensus, and talk about accountability, talk about how we are going to move forwards together, specifically on this issue. And the fact that since then to now, we haven't been able to find a pathway forwards, to find the next steps is disappointing to me. And for us to keep on calling witnesses that have literally nothing to add to what has already been said is disappointing to me as well. We have heard again and again and again from every single department on this that there was no ministerial sign-off on this, that ministers were not involved. This was a middle management issue. There are RCMP investigations happening. What is the role of our committee then if all we're going to do is just try to find linkages between political work and with what has egregiously happened here? We can't keep doing that, Chair, and I would submit to you that I would ask you to perhaps reconsider that the best way forward for us here is not to try to find like that red herring or whatever it is that the Conservatives are looking for.
Pull my finger.
To bring it back to reasonable decision making as to what the next steps are. How are we going to fix our process? That is the role of what our committee is and should be doing, not to go down these fishing expeditions. So I would again submit to you, Chair, that I think that it is best that we bring in TBS officials to talk about those next steps rather than a minister who really, as we've heard time and time and time again, had nothing to do with this at all. I'll stop there, Chair, and hopefully we'll come back to it at a later time.
Thank you very much. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I, too, must echo the words of my colleague in that
she talks right out of her nose directly. That's why the microphone is hooked to her nose.
Meetings that we've had on this issue, and consistently,
it's hard to watch these guys without getting too frustrated, right? Like,
as well as
again, if anybody's been watching since the beginning, we're about 2.5 hours in, and it's getting to me too. I'm interrupting this stupid bitch because I don't care anymore because I'm frustrated with, especially that little Khalid chick.
Interference. Indeed, it is part.
How can she say all that stuff? It's just lies.
Professional practice and in keeping with this separation of the machinery of government, which must continue regardless of who the government is in power, and the political side, which rightfully so is presenting the kind of vision and policy and way forward, new legislation and so on that needs to be put forward to ensure that Canadians have a better quality of life, and so that we can enjoy the standards that, in fact, Canada enjoys on so many levels, and namely in a time of one of the greatest crises that we had in the last 100 years, a global pandemic, that this professional public service was able to procure the kind of protective equipment, the kind of administrative and management processes that were needed to protect Canadians until vaccines were developed and
What's wrong with her?
obtained
Why can't she
again
talk?
by this professional team. And I'm going to wager that none of us here around the table would have been able to do the same work. Chair, would you agree with me? Would you like to have been in that seat? Trying to get PPE and trying to get
Like, it's a big joke. She's
people
laughing.
to develop an
It's not a big
application
joke.
and trying
Like,
to
oh no,
find,
it was really tough, so we
trying to
wasted
develop vaccines.
millions and millions of
No, we are
dollars of
politicians.
taxpayers'
We
money.
have a role.
Like,
We represent our constituencies, but we are not there
would you want to do
run
that
the
job?
machinery
Like,
of government.
so it's
That,
okay to do a
rightfully
bad
so, is
job of
separate
that
from the
job?
political arm. But to hear my conservative colleagues speak, the political arm should be dipping its fingers into every pie, and I think we know what that would mean. And we've all traveled enough and have seen other regimes in other countries to know what that means. That means favoritism and corruption, and certainly at the most benign, an inefficiency and ineffectual government. And so
this is nothing but a filibuster.
Really,
Like, she's
only
wasting time.
in this issue, which we are all gripped with, the fact that there was inappropriate contracting, that there were bad actors that were taking advantage, and that
Like
is
Trudeau.
what is horrific in this case, to think that they're, for all of the public servants that were working above and beyond the call of duty during a very, very difficult time, that there were some bad actors that were taking advantage of that crisis to line their own pockets. We are gripped with that. And that is the reason why I have confidence, and I would think that everyone here around the table would have confidence that the investigations that are being conducted right now, not just internally, not just by the Auditor General, but also by the RCMP, will get to the truth of the matter, and that those who are responsible will be held to account. And that is how we can ensure that our public service can continue to operate with integrity, not by picking and choosing who we want to blame and who we want to throw in jail or whatever it is, showboating that some politicians want to do. So when we come back to this motion, my preference definitely would be to invite back ministry officials, deputy ministers and so on, which is why, again, Chair, we had to pass a motion here earlier in the week, and I'm glad for the support that we did have from the NDP to invite deputy ministers to this these hearings, because
Oh, sorry,
we were
did
not
that
consulted
put you
at
out of
all
your way?
about the number of meetings.
I have a new
out of,
appreciation for my
original motion that
dislike
talked about
of
2
Shanahan.
meetings.
Like,
So
I've
we
been
were not
watching
consulted
politics
about
now for a
holding
while.
Further meetings and about who those witnesses would be,
Khalid
and how
and
they were
Shanahan
chosen, and
have
for the
gone
length of time, and when
so
those
low on
meetings
my
would
list of people
occur.
that I'll
And
watch.
so it is
Like,
really
I'm
been
making a video
extremely
about this bitch tonight.
frustrating
Like,
for the members here,
gonna make
who
her look
really
bad.
do want to get
Like,
to the bottom of what
or I'm just gonna show her
transpired
and say, like,
to
look,
be able
this
to
woman
produce
is
a
awful.
report
Like,
out of this study that will actually
she's
be
lying
useful
right to your
for,
face.
officials going forward
In this second.
and parliamentarians
Lying to your
for
face.
that matter, to be able to continue to have confidence that oversight function be
Every third word is a word. Every
upheld, and
2/3
heard
are
testimony to that
stutters.
effect.
Like,
But as we have
come
done
on.
in the past, we will ask for follow-up. We have asked for action plans. That's
sorry,
something
I've
that
been
actually,
watching this for a few hours
I think
straight,
it was
and It's starting to
myself
get
and
to
the
me a
NDP
bit,
member at the time,
just like
in
other
the
people mentioned
42nd Parliament, we asked
online,
for action plans
that
to
I've
be
got to go.
submitted
It's getting to me.
the
That's
public
what these
accounts
liberals
so
do,
that we had
guys.
assurance that our recommendations were indeed being followed up on, ours and the Auditor General's. And I'm not sure,
Liberals,
and
Fibrils,
you know, I
like-
appreciate our regular member from the NDP, Monsieur Desjardins, cannot be with us during this time, and I do want to extend my sympathies.
I do
to him and his
apologize
family.
for
I
getting
understand he's going
frustrated
through
because
a
I
difficult
mostly try to
time
bring
right
a good
now.
time to
So
the channel.
We've had different
Like,
members from the NDP
that's my
here, and
personality,
I'm not sure
but
that they realized yesterday.
what else
in
is she
passing
doing but
the,
filibustering right now? Because
other
what has she said in the last 6
motion
minutes?
by Mr. Genuis yesterday that
Disgusting.
they were actually putting a
And it does
target
frustrate me,
on the back
like-
of any and all
Because it's-
public servants.
Again,
who
I
may
don't
or
know
may
really
not
anybody,
be
but like,
legitimately
I care
carrying
about the
out,
people at the grocery store in a loose,
other,
grand way. Like, I care
other
about everybody,
contracts
but
for the federal government. I'm
now
not an expert
come on,
in this field,
lady. Jesus.
but you know, there's whenever we try to make a one rule fits all, there's always a number of very
Hard to watch.
viable and understandable exceptions to that. But you know, Mr. Genuis was going through for that hit and trying to actually in having that reported
Yeah.
to the House.
I'm with you, Mike.
use
I'm
up
about to flip
time
out.
in the House
Like,
of Commons
I'm like kind of hoping
with
that
these, and I believe that's
I don't know how
where
much
there's
time we
over
have left
6,000
in this, but
hours and over 200 reports that are
I'm the
on
same as
notice
everybody
right
else
now
on
that
this
can
channel.
be,
I've had my fill.
debated on a concurrent mode. That's basically, Chair,
Gotta
when
watch
there's
it all,
a
though.
report that has been produced out of a committee, everybody agreed, the report has been tabled, and all of a sudden we want to have 3 hours of extended debate.
Where is the chair on this one? God damn it, cut
essentially
her
a
off.
filibuster on the report in the House of Commons. Why? To waste the House of Commons time. And we know that we have important legislation. In fact, the farmer care legislation that I'm so pleased that we were able to work with the NDP and, you know, to put forward this farmer care legislation. As a member in Quebec, I'm well aware of how important and life-changing having access to prescription drugs is, and now that we'll be able to extend that across the country. But will we? Because we've got 6,000 hours projected of concurrent waste the House of Commons time motions on notice by the Conservative government. And so I would ask
Hey, Canada Jax, what's up?
for all members here to consider, you know, if we really want to have the minister here, why don't we just invite her? I mean, we have had ministers here before.
Couldn't have you
We can
just asked that question
invite her.
and then passed the ball?
That's all right. You know, that's something that this
Honestly.
committee has done, and it is something where
This is a tough one,
we've always
guys.
been respectful of the fact that ministers have many time constraints, and I think that it's behooves us to from this committee to have a motion that shows that respect. And again, if we were discussing this as we usually do in committee, could be in camera, could be in public, but together as a committee during committee business, we could have come to a reasonable invitation to the minister. But no, here we are. We're over time. People have other things to do, but this is what
I hear you, James.
Mr.
It's just
Genuis
hard to
decided,
watch, man. Like,
was the ideal time to pull this stunt. And so I move the following amendment that
because when she
the
woke
text
up this morning,
that this meeting
she knew that she'd be
occur
doing this
within 3
later in
weeks
the
of
day.
this motion
Like,
being adopted be deleted from the motion.
everybody likes to think the politicians are stupid.
Thank you.
They're not.
That is certainly in order. We're now debating the amendment to remove the 3 weeks. So, I'm going to confer with the chair for a second. Pardon me, I'm the chair. I'm going to confer with the clerk 1 second.
Yeah, sorry there, guys, about getting a little wound up.
Very good.
But
so we're now.
I just
going
don't
to debate
respect
the amendment
liars.
to this motion to remove
And
within 3 weeks.
That Shanahan
Miss
woman.
Ilut, would you like to speak to this, or would you?
She's
like
a
me to
liar.
just hold you till we come back to the main motion? The floor is yours if you'd like to.
No, I'd like to speak later.
Okay, thank you. Miss Yip, do you want to speak to this amendment, or would you like to have me hold your name and I will come back to it once this amendment is addressed?
Yes,
we'll
I can
see.
speak to
Maybe.
this.
Okay.
We should. So can we put this to a vote?
Speaking to it, yes. Are you done?
Yeah.
Good.
Let's just put it to a vote.
Miss, I have to go through the speaking. Miss Khalid, your hand was up, but then it came down. Do you want to speak to this amendment, or shall we proceed
Hopefully it
to
got
a vote
cut
to
off.
remove within 3 weeks?
I think it'll pass.
Khalid is brutal,
I think
man.
it might.
Imagine that these
Not
people
hearing from Miss
like
Khalid,
think
clerk,
that
call
they're
the vote,
good
please, please.
people.
Shall the amendment proposed by Ms. Shanahan carry? Mr. Van Bynen.
It's just hard to watch, guys. Like again, it's been too many hours.
Mr.
My
Van
back's
Bynen, you're on
not good, so I'm a
Sorry.
little
Yeah, I was
frustrated
on
that
mute
way
in
too.
favor.
But
Favor, thank you.
Mr. Pawlowski.
For.
Ms. Khalid.
You're on mute, Miss Khalid.
Ms. Khalid.
You're on mute, Miss Khalid.
and she's dumb.
And I'll just,
So-
in the meantime, we're voting on an amendment put forward by Ms. Shanahan.
My apologies, Chair. Was having a hard time finding the vote button. I vote yes.
Thank you. And if I could ask you just put your headset on if you speak again. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shanahan.
Yes.
Ms. Yip.
Yes.
Ms. Block.
I'm seeing a nay vote from Ms. Block on the camera, which is acceptable. Ms.
Mr.
Block votes
Barrett?
nay.
Ms. Kuzi.
Against.
Monsieur Lemire.
Contre.
Ms. Zidlout.
Akapunga against.
5 yeas, 5 nays.
Very good. Ms. Shanahan, I'm afraid your amendment is defeated. I'm obviously voting, and I'm now returning to the speaking list. Ms. Idlout, you have the floor on the motion that was presented to us. Over to you, please.
Kuyanami Ixivatali. Thank you, Chair. It is a pleasure to represent the NDP.
Lori Idlout is a pleasure
and
to
I
watch
share the sentiments
over
that were
those
shared
other
about my
ladies,
colleague.
guaranteed. This will be okay. Reasonable.
I wish him well during his time of grief. I have complete faith in our whole party and what we've heard and the advice given to us by our staff. So when I'm sharing my feedback, it is because of what I've heard, and unfortunately, what I'm hearing during this debate at committee is a lot of partisanship when we should be demanding accountability. What I've heard from the witnesses, from the officials, and I appreciate that it was based on a new motion regarding this study, is that the officials were not able to answer my questions. And inviting them back will mean that even if I repeat those questions to those same officials, they will not be answered. I understand that there were officials from the Treasury Board Secretariat I'm pretty sure that if I asked those officials those same questions, they would not give the same information that Canadians deserve. And the reason I say what Canadians deserve, the original intent of the Arrivecan app was supposed to be about $80,000. And to hear that over time, 55 million at the very minimum was spent to have this app operate so-called for the protection of Canadians' health is completely unacceptable. It was only recently that I learned that the recipients of this contract claim to have Indigenous identity and use that in this contract. So there are still a lot of unanswered questions. And when I asked my questions, instead of the officials responding or accepting responsibility, diverted that information to be answered by another department. And I think that given the huge amount of losses that this program costed, deserve the scrutiny that it's received. I'm not convinced by other interventions that we've been told how many hours have been spent on this, especially when there are still lingering questions about the colossal failure of what has happened. And we need to make sure that the officials aren't the final stop in seeking answers. We do need to hear from the president of the Treasury Board, because it is the president that can give us the bigger picture that we're looking for and where those miscommunications costed Canadians so many millions of dollars. I need to say this again. Nunavut are suffering. The level of poverty that exists in Nunavut, and for Nunavut to continue to be ignored, for Nunavut to continue have to lose to profits to CEOs is completely unacceptable. We need accountability. We need answers. And because of that, I support this motion to get those answers from the president of the Treasury Board.
Thank you very much. I'm going to go to Ms. Yip next, and then Ms. Shanahan, because Ms. Yip was on the roll call earlier. If you two would like to swap, you're welcome to do that. But Ms. Yip, you have the floor. Okay, and I'm seeing agreement from Ms. Shanahan. Ms. Yip, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chair. I agree with my colleagues on my side that the minister has already been invited to government operations on the same issue. So I don't feel that there's really a need to repeat the invitation here, and that it just ties up more time, more resources. We have just on this Public Accounts Committee, we have so many outstanding reports to review. In fact, we've barely moved on reports, on the completion of reports that we were looking at last year. And we certainly had many, many meetings on Arrivecan. And now the Auditor General is about to table new reports, and yet we haven't even completed the work that we have set out to do last year. So I feel that it's also been clear that referring to the report to the House part, this is political tactic by the Conservatives to clog up the House and to waste time and resources and to stop us from passing legislation that supports Canadians, such as pharmacare. And I really don't think that's right to take all this time away. So I'd just like to propose an amendment to remove the report to the House. Thank you.
Again, Ms. Yip, I'm going to rule it out of order because that fundamentally changes the nature of the motion to.
They just keep messing around like they don't know.
I'm going to remove that out of order.
Sorry,
You're welcome.
this has been a frustrating one, guys, this afternoon. I've apologized on here for my frustration.
I don't.
This is like 3 hours of watching them in a row lying to people I care about.
I'm going to challenge that.
It's the worst when you see something bad happening to somebody that you care
I'll ask
about.
the clerk to call the roll call.
Worse than having it happen to you.
My decision.
And they're going to get away with it.
Just give us a second.
Shall the decision of the chair be sustained?
Sorry, don't know what's
Mr.
going
Brennan?
on. Not sure.
No.
Mr. Pawlowski?
No.
Ms. Khalid?
It's a no for me.
Ms. Shanahan?
No.
Ms. Yip?
No.
Ms. Block?
Ms. Block is signaling a yes. Record her vote as a yes.
Mr. Barrett? Yes. Ms. Kuzi?
Yes.
Monsieur Lemire?
En faveur.
Ms. Idlout?
Angertunga, yes.
5 yeas, 5 nays.
The decision of the chair is sustained. Ms. Yip, you still have the floor. Or you can turn to your colleague, Ms. Shanahan.
I just feel that we are.
How do you feel?
I guess I can't go back to it.
Tell
but I
us
just
how you
that
feel.
I want to say that
Yep.
we are just removing something. We're not causing the motion to be out of scope.
It's hard to watch, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
Yeah, I'd
Actually,
have to continue.
just one, Ms. Clede, you had your hand up some time ago, and it's not up now. I just want to confirm if you're speaking after Ms. Shanahan, or if you'd like to speak at all, but you have to wait your turn.
Of course, I love speaking, Chair,
Yes.
and will continue to speak. That's what my constituents send me to Ottawa for.
Not a fan.
So
Not a
yes,
fan
I do
at
reserve
all.
the rights
Like-
to speak
Very good.
after Ms.
I'm a
Shanahan.
You'll be up
respectful
after Ms. Shanahan.
person.
Ms. Shanahan, you have the floor.
I
Thank
don't
you.
respect that person.
Chair,
Like,
I would actually like to have some clarification.
Oh, she wants clarification
on,
now.
Your ruling on.
Here's
your
something to be
decision
clarified. A woman your
call
age shouldn't be
that,
dyeing your
Ms.
hair
Yip's
stupid
amendment
colors.
out of scope, because it is simply deleting text from the motion. It is not taking away at all from the invitation to have the minister come.
They've got me a
before this
little burned
committee.
today, guys.
I think it is entirely within the scope, and so for future reference, I would like to have that clarification from the clerk.
Well, the clerk will tell you what she just told me. It has been decided by this committee. The debate is back to the motion. You have the floor, Ms. Shanahan.
That's very unfortunate that we were not able to discuss this further because, again, the practice of this committee has been to
Okay. So that's hung up, it seems.
Oh, again, Mr. Genuis, then Ms. Khalid. Ms. Kuzi, and then Ms. Shanahan.
No,
amendment.
we're way off,
Not
guys.
just ask for action plans. That's fine.
So,
Sorry, gang. Something happened with the internet stream in the middle
Shanahan, I'm
there.
afraid you're.
Our operation.
Ms. Shannon, you have the floor. Thank you.
Oh,
Chair, I would
wrapped
actually
up.
like to have some clarification on.
All right. Well, so here we go. I'm sorry, guys. That dropped out. Shanahan finally killed the internet just with the sound of her boring voice. What a frustrating period of time to watch in Canadian Parliament. So that's about 3 hours that we just watched right there of Conservatives asking questions about a scandal and things that happened and getting no straight answers from that little witch Khalid and then Shanahan, who those girls are brutal. I don't care about the block. But Baird and Kusi, Garnett did great jobs, I thought. The witnesses weren't being cooperative, and then Khalid let them out early for some bizarre reason. I don't know why they would ever let witnesses leave early when they're having trouble getting witnesses to show up. It's very frustrating. I'll apologize for getting frustrated during the podcast today, but after about 2.5 hours, it did start getting to me. And I am having back spasms and stuff, so it's just kind of hard to sit here at all. But this is the stuff that Canadians need to see. Would you not agree? You'll end up talking to somebody about what we saw today. Did you know that the Liberals are very aware that all of this corruption has been going on and they've been wasting our tax dollars like crazy, and one hand washes the other? Hopefully you'll have a conversation with somebody about that tomorrow. Not that it's an enlightening conversation, but Canadians need to know that all of the tough times, economic times, recently, that doesn't just happen. It's not happening in all the other countries. They tell us it is, but it's not. It isn't. Anyhow, we're going to get going. We've done a few hours here today, and before we go, I do want to say hello to everybody. There's so many people here in the chat room. Joan, Calamaru, there's a few mics in the room today. Insulator, hey Patty, what's up? Mitchell, Vern, I obviously said Joan already. Charlene was here earlier. Dive Crew Canada has been a big help to this channel. He made me these badges. He made me that's a 3D badge. Pretty friggin' cool. And he made me this coffee cup that got broken in transit, but super cool, right? We're growing stuff here on Question Period Canada. We're here every day, and we will be. We make other videos, we make shorts to try to kind of just stay on top of it and a little bit of humor in there. But if you check out any of our other videos, we really only want to show Canadians what I think Canadians need to see. I'm not some narcissist where I think oh, my answer is the only one. I just know that it used to be better than it is, and it could get better again, but not with the leadership that we currently have. We need an election. Why doesn't JAGMEET and the NDP stand up for Canadians and have that election? Because if they don't do that, they're never going to recover as a party. They'll just go the way of the dodo bird and be extinct. Because if the NDP doesn't recover for Canadians soon, they'll never trust you again. And I just hope for Canadians we can get an election. That's all I want. Is Canadians to have a right to vote for the next leader. Who looks like it's going to be Poilievre, people like Poilievre. I like Poilievre. He's entertaining. He's funny. Like, he's smart. Like, I don't know how honest or any of that stuff he is, but he's much better than the options that we've got going on right now. Anyhow, guys, we're going to run. I'm Ehren, Question Period Canada. It's always a blast here. I love hanging out with you guys in the chat room, meeting so many people. You can find my email here. I'm going to put my email up in case you ever want to get in touch. If you ever want to get in touch, that's how to get in touch with me. And besides that, I just look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Maybe we'll be on here again tonight. We'll try to find something a little lighter to watch because I can't go through another few hours of material that is that frustrating to watch. I just don't like people lying to my friends or trying to take advantage of the people I care about. And I do care about my fellow Canadians. The ones I don't even know, just the people that are similar to myself, which are most of us. Anyhow, that's it. I'm Ehren, Question Period Canada. Like, subscribe, share it with somebody, get notified. If you have any questions, concerns, anything, be in touch. My email's right there. And that's it. Love you guys and can't wait to hang out tomorrow. We'll be checking you out then. What a weird and wild afternoon that was. 3 hours of just like getting your mind screwed. Brutal.